No one dared to milk the alien king except the human girl. As Dr. Luna Simpson steps into the ornate chamber of King Zorn on planet Yadra, the fate of interstellar relations hangs in the balance. The Yadaran royal court watches with bated breath as Luna unpacks her specialized equipment. Tension crackles in the air, a palpable force that seems to press against her skin. She catches a glimpse of Gary Dixon, her ex-boyfriend and current human ambassador, pacing anxiously outside the chamber doors. Luna's mind races, recalling the urgent message that brought her to this alien world. Just days ago, she was in her lab on Earth, studying xenobiology. Now, she stands before the ailing Yadaran king, tasked with a procedure so culturally taboo that no Yadaran dares attempt it. The king's massive form lies still on an elaborate bed, his iridescent scales dulled by illness. Luna approaches, her heart pounding. She knows the stakes. Extract a specialized hormone from glands near the king's abdomen, or risk not only his life, but the stability of Yadaran society and humanity's standing in the galactic community. Outside, Gary struggles to maintain his diplomatic composure. He'd arrived on Yadra to negotiate a crucial trade agreement, only to find himself embroiled in a life-or-death crisis. The Yadaran nobles eye him warily, their trust in humanity hanging by a thread. Luna takes a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. The milking procedure, as the Yadarans call it, is delicate and precise. One wrong move could spell disaster. She glances at the specialized equipment she brought from Earth, modified to work with Yadaran physiology. The room falls silent as Luna begins. Her hands move with practiced precision, guided by years of research and an innate understanding of alien biology. The Yadaran nobles watch, a mix of hope and skepticism etched on their faces. As Luna works, she can't help but reflect on the strange turn of events that brought her here. The tension with Gary, the weight of interspecies relations on her shoulders, the bizarre nature of the task at hand. It all seems surreal. Minutes tick by, feeling like hours. Luna's focus narrows to the task at hand, blocking out the watchful eyes of the Yadaran court. She carefully extracts the life-saving hormone, her movements slow and deliberate. Finally, Luna steps back, holding a vial of shimmering liquid. The hormone, essential for the king's survival, glows faintly in the chamber's dim light. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the room. As Luna turns to face the Yadaran nobles, she knows this is just the beginning. The success of her mission will open doors for humanity, cementing their place among the stars. But the challenges ahead are numerous, and the delicate balance of interstellar diplomacy rests on her shoulders. Outside, Gary waits, knowing that the next few moments will determine the course of human-Yadaran relations for years to come. As the chamber doors begin to open, he braces himself for whatever comes next, ready to face the consequences of humanity's bold step into the unknown. As the chamber doors begin to open, Gary's heart races. He steps forward, eager to learn the outcome of Luna's delicate procedure. But before he can enter, a cacophony of alarms erupts throughout the palace, shattering the tense silence. Gary whirls around, his diplomatic instincts kicking into high gear. "What's happening?" he demands, addressing the nearest Yadaran official. The alien's multifaceted eyes widen with fear. Intruders in the palace. It's Prince Kale and his followers. Cursing under his breath, Gary glances back at the chamber doors. He knows Luna is still inside, focused on the critical task of extracting the hormone from King Zorn. She's vulnerable, unaware of the danger rapidly approaching. Inside the royal chamber, Luna works with intense concentration, her hands steady as she maneuvers her specialized equipment. The procedure is proving more complex than she anticipated. King Zorn's alien physiology presents unexpected challenges, forcing her to make rapid adjustments to her technique. She's dimly aware of commotion outside, but her focus remains on the task at hand. The king's massive form trembles slightly beneath her touch, his iridescent scales reflecting the soft glow of her instruments. As Luna delves deeper into the intricacies of Yadran biology, she becomes acutely aware of a strange, almost electrical energy emanating from the king's body. It tingles against her skin, raising the fine hairs on her arms. The sensation is both exhilarating and unsettling, a stark reminder of just how alien her patient truly is. Meanwhile, Gary springs into action, his mind racing to formulate a plan. He needs to protect Luna and ensure the success of her mission, but he's outnumbered and unfamiliar with the palace layout. As if in answer to his unspoken plea, a tall, lithe Yadran steps forward. Her iridescent skin shimmers in the flickering emergency lights, and her purple eyes lock onto Gary's with fierce tenacity. "I am Nyla of the Royal Guard," she announces, her voice melodious yet commanding. "I will help you reach your companion." Gary nods gratefully, falling into step beside Nyla as they rush down the ornate corridors. The sounds of conflict echo through the palace. Shouts, the clash of weapons, and the occasional energy discharge. As they round a corner, they encounter a group of rebels. Gary raises his hands, his diplomatic training kicking in. "Wait, we don't need to fight. Think about what you're doing. This could jeopardize everything your people have worked for." His words give some of the rebels pause, creating a moment of hesitation. Nyla seizes the opportunity, moving with lightning speed to disarm the nearest attacker. Gary watches in awe as she flows through the group, her movements a deadly dance. In the aftermath, Gary finds himself admiring Nyla's grace and skill. Their eyes meet, and for a moment, the chaos around them fades away. There's an unexpected spark of connection, a flicker of mutual attraction that catches them both off guard. But there's no time to dwell on these newfound feelings. They press on, fighting their way through the palace. Gary's quick thinking and Nyla's combat prowess prove to be a formidable combination. Back in the royal chamber, Luna's procedure reaches a critical juncture. The king's condition begins to deteriorate rapidly, his scales losing their luster. Luna's heart pounds as she realizes she needs to work faster. As she continues the extraction, Luna discovers that the process requires a more intimate approach than she had initially thought. She hesitates for a split second, her professional boundaries pushed to their limits. But the urgency of the situation leaves her no choice. With a deep breath, Luna presses on, her hands moving with precision as she navigates the alien terrain of the king's body. The electrical energy she sensed earlier intensifies, making her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. Outside the chamber, Gary and Nyla arrive to find Prince Kale and his elite guards attempting to break down the door. The prince, his scales a deep crimson in his rage, turns to face them. "Stand aside, human," Kale snarls. "This is not your affair." Gary stands his ground, his voice steady. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Your Highness. What happens in that room affects us all, human and Yadran alike." Kale's response is a roar of fury as he launches himself at Gary. The human ambassador ducks, years of academy training kicking in. As he evades the prince's attack, Nyla engages the elite guards. The ensuing battle is fierce and chaotic. Gary finds himself back-to-back with Nyla, their bodies moving in sync as they fend off attacks from all sides. The close proximity heightens the tension between them, adding an unexpected layer of complexity to their alliance. Inside the chamber, oblivious to the battle raging outside, Luna finally completes the procedure. She steps back, holding a vial of shimmering opalescent liquid, the life-saving hormone successfully extracted from King Zorn. As she secures the vial, Luna notices something unusual about the hormone. It seems to pulse with an inner light, its properties unlike anything she's encountered in her years of xenobiological research. Intrigued, she carefully takes a small sample, knowing that this discovery could have far-reaching implications for both human and Yadran medicine. Just as she finishes, the king's eyes flutter open, his gaze, multifaceted and alien, focuses on Luna with an intensity that makes her breath catch. Then, with a strength that belies his recent illness, King Zorn rises from his bed. His voice, when it comes, is like thunder, reverberating through the palace walls. Enough! The single word cuts through the chaos, freezing everyone in their tracks. Outside the chamber, Prince Kael's forces lower their weapons, stunned by the sound of their king's voice. The chamber doors swing open, revealing Luna standing beside the imposing figure of King Zorn. Gary, bruised but triumphant, locks eyes with her across the room. In that moment, a flood of emotions passes between them, relief, pride, and a rekindling of feelings they thought long buried. As the dust settles and Prince Kael is led away in chains, the full impact of the day's events begins to sink in. Luna's successful procedure has not only saved the king's life, but has also opened up new possibilities for human-Yadran relations. Gary steps forward, his diplomatic mind already racing with the implications. But as he reaches Luna's side, he's struck by the weariness in her eyes and the trembling of her hands. He realizes that the challenges they face today are just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that will test them in ways they never imagined. As the dust settled in the palace corridors, King Zorn's thunderous voice continued to echo through the halls. The failed coup attempt had been thwarted, and a new era of human-Yadran relations was dawning. Gary and Luna exchanged a look of relief, their shared ordeal having rekindled a spark between them. King Zorn, his scales now shimmering with renewed vitality, stepped forward. "This day marks a turning point for our worlds," he declared, his multifaceted eyes sweeping over the assembled humans and Yadrans. "We must celebrate this victory and the strengthening of our alliance." The king's proclamation set the palace abuzz with activity. Yadran officials scurried about, their iridescent forms blurring as they rushed to prepare for the grand celebration. Gary found himself thrust into the center of the preparations, his role as human ambassador suddenly more crucial than ever. "Ambassador Dixon," a melodious voice called out. Gary turned to see Nyla approaching, her live form moving with fluid grace. "The king requests your assistance in coordinating the Ur delegation's participation in the festivities." Gary nodded, acutely aware of the warmth that spread through him at Nyla's presence. "Of course," he replied, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. "I'd be honored to help." As Gary immersed himself in the intricate details of diplomatic protocol and cultural exchange, Luna found herself besieged by curious Yadran scientists. The success of her procedure had catapulted her into the spotlight of the alien scientific community. Dr. Simpson, a Yadran with iridescent purple scales, addressed her, eyes gleaming with excitement. "I am Zira, lead xenobiologist of the Royal Academy. Your work with King Zorn's physiology is groundbreaking. Would you consider collaborating on a joint research project?" Luna's eyes widened at the proposal, her scientific curiosity piqued. "That sounds fascinating, Zira. I'd love to learn more about your research." As the days passed, Gary and Luna found themselves pulled in different directions. Gary worked closely with Nyla, learning the intricacies of Yadran culture and protocol. Each interaction deepened his fascination with her alien physiology and the warrior caste she belonged to, the Zarek caste. Nyla explained during a rare, quiet moment, her purple eyes meeting Gary's. "We are trained from birth to protect and serve. Our empathic abilities allow us to anticipate threats before they manifest." Gary leaned in, captivated. "That's incredible. How does it work?" As Nyla described the nuances of Yadran empathic abilities, Gary found himself drawn not just to her words, but to the graceful movements of her hands, the subtle shifts in her iridescent skin. He caught himself wondering what it would be like to touch that alien skin, to explore the differences between their species. Meanwhile, Luna delved deep into her collaboration with Zira. The Yadran lab was a marvel of alien technology, filled with equipment that seemed to defy the laws of physics as Luna understood them. "The hormone we extracted from King Zorn," Zira explained, gesturing to a holographic display of molecular structures. "It has properties unlike anything we've seen before. It could revolutionize both human and Yadran medicine." Luna nodded, her mind racing with the possibilities. If we can understand how it interacts with Yadran physiology, we might be able to develop new treatments for a wide range of conditions. As they worked, Luna couldn't help but notice the grace with which Zira moved through the lab, the alien scientist's movements as fluid as water. She found herself studying Zira's form, noting the differences and similarities to human anatomy. The day of the celebration arrived, bringing with it a whirlwind of activity. The capital city of Yadra was transformed, its already striking architecture adorned with shimmering decorations that seemed to defy gravity. Gary and Luna found themselves at the center of attention as they joined King Zorn in a grand procession through the city. The streets were lined with Yadrans, their multifaceted eyes wide with curiosity at the sight of the humans. As they moved through the alien landscape, Gary caught Luna's eye. For a moment, the complexity of their situation hung between them. Their shared history, their new alien interests, the weight of their responsibilities. Luna offered a small smile, and Gary felt a familiar warmth at his chest, mingled with a new uncertainty. The procession led to a vast hall where the feast was to be held. As they took their places at the high table, King Zorn rose to address the gathered crowd. "Today we celebrate not just a medical miracle," the king's voice boomed, "but the dawn of a new era of cooperation between our worlds." Gary tensed, sensing the weight of the moment. He glanced at Luna, seeing his own mixture of excitement and apprehension mirrored in her eyes. King Zorn continued, "To cement this alliance, I hereby appoint Gary Dixon as permanent human ambassador to Yadra." The hall erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds that Gary assumed was applause. "And to Dr. Luna Simpson, I offer the position of medical and scientific advisor to the royal court." The announcement sent ripples of excitement and concern through the gathered crowd. Gary and Luna exchanged shocked glances, the implications of the king's offer sinking in. As the feast began, Gary found his mind racing. The opportunity to serve as permanent ambassador was beyond his wildest dreams, but it would mean leaving Earth behind. His gaze drifted to Nyla, who stood at attention nearby, and then back to Luna, who was deep in conversation with Zira. Luna, for her part, felt a similar turmoil. The chance to study Yadran biology in depth was tempting, but could she leave her life on Earth behind? And what of her complicated feelings for Gary? Their contemplation was interrupted by a commotion at the far end of the hall. A breathless Yadran guard burst in, scales flashing in distress. "Your Majesty," the guard gasped, "Prince Kale has escaped." The news cast a pall over the festivities. King Zorn's expression darkened, his scales shifting to a deep, troubled hue. As the implications of Prince Kale's escape sank in, Gary and Luna found themselves at a crossroads. The positions offered by King Zorn now carried not just opportunity, but potential danger. They knew their decisions would shape not only their own futures, but the course of human-Yadran relations for years to come. Gary caught Luna's eye across the turbulent hall. In that moment, they both realized that whatever they decided, nothing would ever be the same again. Gary and Luna exchanged a meaningful glance as the news of Prince Kale's escape rippled through the hall. The weight of King Zorn's offer hung heavy in the air, now tinged with an undercurrent of danger. In the days that followed, as the palace buzzed with heightened security measures, Gary and Luna found themselves grappling with the decision that would shape their futures. They spent long hours discussing the implications of accepting the king's generous offer, weighing the opportunities against the risks and the ties that bound them to Earth. Finally, after careful consideration, they made their choice. In a private audience with King Zorn, Gary stepped forward, his posture straight and his voice steady. "Your Majesty, we are deeply honored by your offer. Luna and I have decided to accept the positions you proposed. We believe our presence here can foster stronger ties between our worlds and contribute to the advancement of both our species. King Zorn's multifaceted eyes gleamed with approval. Excellent. Your decision brings great joy to our court. Ambassador Dixon, Dr. Simpson, welcome to your new home. As they settled into their new roles, Gary and Luna found themselves immersed in the alien world of Yadra. Gary's days were filled with diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, and strategic planning sessions. He worked closely with Nyla, the Yadran guard who had stood by his side during the coup attempt. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens discussing security protocols, Gary found himself captivated by the way the alien sunlight played across Nyla's iridescent scales. "Tell me more about your warrior caste," Gary said, his curiosity piqued. "You mentioned empathic abilities before. How does that work in combat situations?" Nyla's purple eyes met his, a spark of excitement in their depths. "Our empathy allows us to anticipate our opponent's moves before they make them. It's not mind reading, but rather a heightened awareness of emotional states and intentions." As she demonstrated a combat stance, Gary marveled at the fluid grace of her movements. He found himself drawn to her alien beauty. The way her form seemed to defy the laws of physics he knew. A warmth spread through his chest, mingled with a twinge of guilt as thoughts of Luna flitted through his mind. Meanwhile, Luna threw herself into her research, spending long hours in the lab with Zira. The Yadran xenobiologist proved to be a brilliant collaborator, her alien perspective offering insights that Luna had never considered. As they pored over holographic displays of molecular structures, Luna's excitement grew. "Zira, look at this. The hormone we extracted from King Zorn. It's not just unique to Yadrans. It's unique to Yadran royalty." Zira's scales shimmered with interest. "Fascinating. What are the implications?" Luna's mind raced with possibilities. "If we can understand how this hormone works, we might be able to develop treatments for a wide range of human degenerative diseases." But she trailed off, the ethical implications of her discovery suddenly looming large. King Zorn was the only source of this potentially life-saving hormone. The idea of regular milking procedures on the king made her uncomfortable, raising questions of consent and exploitation. As Luna grappled with the moral quandaries of her research, she noticed King Zorn taking a keen interest in her work. His visits to the lab became more frequent, his questions more personal. While flattered by his attention, Luna felt a growing unease at the blurring lines between her roles as medical advisor, researcher, and now, object of royal interest. One evening, as Luna prepared to leave the lab, she found Gary waiting outside. The sight of him sent a familiar flutter through her chest, complicated by the weeks of distance between them. "Luna, we need to talk," Gary said, his expression serious. "I've uncovered some disturbing information about Prince Kale's activities." They made their way to a secluded corner of the palace gardens. As the alien moons rose in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the exotic flora, Gary shared his findings. "Prince Kale is gathering support among conservative factions," he explained, his voice low. "They're opposed to closer ties with humans. Nyla and I have been investigating, and we've uncovered a network of conspirators within the government." Luna listened, her brow furrowed with concern. As Gary spoke, she felt the weight of her own secret pressing down on her. Taking a deep breath, she decided to confide in him. "Gary, there's something you need to know about my research," she began. She explained her discoveries about the royal hormone, its potential benefits, and the ethical dilemmas it presented. Gary's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. "Luna, this is incredible and dangerous if this information falls into the wrong hands." His words were cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps. They turned to see Nyla emerging from the shadows, her scales gleaming in the moonlight. "Ambassador, Dr. Simpson," she said, her voice urgent. We've intercepted a communication. Prince Kael knows about the hormone. He's planning to kidnap King Zorn to control the supply. The gravity of the situation hit them like a physical force. They exchanged glances, years of shared history and untenacited feelings passing between them in an instant. Whatever personal complications they faced, they knew they had to act fast to protect King Zorn and the future of human-Yadran relations. As they hurried back to the palace, the alien landscape of Yadra stretching out before them, Gary, Luna, and Nyla steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. The fate of two worlds now rested in their hands, their personal feelings and ethical dilemmas intertwined with the looming threat of interstellar conflict. The fate of two worlds now rested in their hands, their personal feelings and ethical dilemmas intertwined with the looming threat of interstellar crisis. Without wasting a moment, Gary, Luna, and Nyla huddled together in a secluded alcove of the palace gardens. The alien flora cast strange shadows around them as they spoke in hushed tones, formulating a plan to protect King Zorn and thwart Prince Kael's kidnapping attempt. "We need to move the king to a secure location," Gary said, his eyes darting around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Somewhere within the palace, known only to us and a select few we can trust implicitly." Luna nodded, her mind already racing. "I'll prepare medical supplies and equipment. If Prince Kael attempts anything drastic, we need to be ready." Nyla's scales shimmered with willpower. "I'll use my empathic abilities to screen the palace staff. We can't risk any of Kael's spies slipping through our defenses." As they put their plan into action, the palace buzzed with nervous energy. Gary coordinated with the Yadran security forces, his diplomatic skills put to the test as he balanced the need for increased protection with the desire to avoid raising alarm among the general population. Luna found herself in the royal chambers, explaining the situation to King Zorn. As she spoke, she noticed a shift in the king's demeanor. His multifaceted eyes seemed to linger on her longer than necessary, his voice taking on a softer tone. "Dr. Simpson," King Zorn said, reaching out to touch her arm, "your dedication to our people is admirable. I find myself increasingly drawn to your intellect and beauty." Luna felt a wave of discomfort wash over her. She took a step back, maintaining a professional smile. "Your Majesty, we must focus on your safety. Please, follow me to the secure location we prepared." As they moved through the palace corridors, Luna caught sight of Gary observing their interaction. His expression was unreadable, but she sensed a mix of concern and something else, jealousy, in his gaze. Meanwhile, Nyla prowled the palace halls, her senses on high alert. Her empathic abilities stretched to their limits as she scanned the emotions of every staff member she encountered. Suddenly, she froze, her scales flashing a warning pattern. "There," she hissed, pointing to a group of servants near the kitchens. "I sense deception, fear, anticipation." Gary was at her side in an instant. Together, they cornered the suspected spies, Nyla's combat training, and Gary's quick thinking making short work of the would-be infiltrators. As they subdued the last of Kael's agents, Gary found himself mesmerized by Nyla's fluid movements and unwavering focus. Their eyes met in the aftermath of the skirmish, faces close, hearts pounding. For a moment, the chaos around them faded away. Gary leaned in, drawn by an irresistible force, but before their lips could meet, a sharp beep from his communication device shattered the moment. "Ambassador Dixon," came an urgent voice, "we've detected unusual energy signatures near the palace perimeter." Reality crashed back in. Gary and Nyla sprang apart, but the tension between them lingered, electric and undetermined. As night fell, the palace defenses were on high alert. Luna, secluded with King Zorn in the fortified safe room, continued her research on the royal hormone. Her latest test revealed an astonishing discovery. The hormone's potency increased with the emotional state of the Yadran royalty. Luna's mind raced with the implications. King Zorn's growing attraction to her could potentially enhance the hormone's effectiveness for medical applications. But the thought of exploiting these feelings, even for the greater good, made her stomach churn. Her ethical dilemma was interrupted by a violent tremor that shook the entire palace. Alarms blared as Prince Kael's forces, using advanced cloaking technology, breached the outer defenses. In the corridors, Gary and Nyla led a team to confront the intruders. Energy blasts scorched the ornate walls as they engaged in fierce combat. Nyla moved with lethal grace, her empathic abilities allowing her to anticipate the enemy's moves. Suddenly, a stray energy bolt hurtled towards Gary. Without hesitation, Nyla threw herself in its path, taking the full brunt of the blast. She crumpled to the ground, scales smoking. "Nyla!" Gary cried, rushing to her side. Her eyes fluttered open, a weak smile on her lips. "I'm fine," she gasped, struggling to her feet. "We must protect the king." In the safe room, Luna faced a critical decision. King Zorn, aware of the dire situation, made an unexpected offer. "Dr. Simpson," he said, his voice grave, "I volunteered to undergo a hormone extraction. It may weaken me, but it could provide us with a powerful advantage against Kael's forces." Luna hesitated, torn between scientific opportunity and ethical concerns. Before she could respond, the door to the safe room burst open. Prince Kael stood in the threshold, flanked by armed supporters, his scales gleaming with malice. "Well, well," he sneered. "It seems I found the prize I've been seeking." As Kael advanced, Luna's mind raced for a solution. In that moment of crisis, she realized that the key to resolving this conflict, and perhaps revolutionizing medicine for both their species, might lie in the very hormone they sought to protect. Gary and Nyla, having fought their way through waves of attackers, finally reached the safe room. They burst in, weapons ready, only to find signs of a struggle. The room was in disarray, and Luna lay unconscious on the floor. King Zorn was nowhere to be seen. As Gary rushed to Luna's side, Nyla secured the perimeter. Luna's eyes fluttered open, and she grasped Gary's arm with unexpected strength. "Gary," she whispered urgently, "I've discovered something about the royal hormone. Something that changes everything." The weight of her words hung in the air, a possible key to unraveling the conflict that threatened to tear apart two worlds. As Luna prepared to reveal her discovery, they all knew that their next moves would shape the future of human-Yadran relations forever. "Gary," Luna whispered urgently, "I've discovered something about the royal hormone. Something that changes everything." Before Luna could elaborate, a loud crash echoed through the palace, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Gary and Nyla exchanged a quick glance, their bodies tensing for action. "We need to move," Gary said, helping Luna to her feet. "Can you walk?" Luna nodded, wincing slightly as she stood. "I'm fine, but we have a bigger problem. King Zorn is gone." Nyla's scales flashed with alarm. "Taken by Prince Kael?" "Most likely," Luna confirmed. "And that's not all. The hormone. Its potency is directly linked to the king's emotional state. Fear and stress could make it dangerously unstable." Gary's eyes widened as he processed the implications. "We need to find him fast, not just for political reasons, but for his own safety." Without wasting another moment, Gary activated his communication device, summoning a team of loyal Yadran guards and human specialists from the Earth Embassy. As they assembled, he outlined the situation, emphasizing the urgency of their mission. "We'll use our advanced tracking technology to locate the king's unique biological signature," Gary explained, distributing small, sleek devices to the team. "But be prepared for anything. Prince Kael is desperate and dangerous." Nyla, her scales still smoking from the earlier energy blast, stepped forward. "I'm coming with you." Gary opened his mouth to protest, But the drive in Nyla's multifaceted eyes silenced him. He knew her warrior training and empathic abilities could be crucial to their success. As the rescue team prepared to depart, Luna busied herself in the makeshift lab, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she assembled a specialized medical kit. She synthesized a stabilizing agent, hoping it would counteract any adverse effects of the king's captivity. "Luna," Gary said softly, approaching her workstation, "are you sure you don't want to come with us?" She looked up, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken emotions. "I need to finish this," she said finally. "It could be the difference between life and death for King Zorn. I'll guide you from here." Gary nodded, understanding the weight of her decision. As he turned to leave, Luna caught his arm. "Be careful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. With a final nod, Gary joined Nyla and the rest of the team. They moved swiftly through the palace corridors, following the faint biological signature of King Zorn. As they exited the palace grounds, the lush Yadaran jungle loomed before them, its alien vegetation pulsing with bioluminescent light in the growing darkness. The tracking devices led them deeper into the jungle, where the dense foliage seemed to swallow all sound. Suddenly, Nyla held up a hand, signaling the team to stop. Her scales shimmered as she extended her empathic senses. "There's something ahead," she whispered. "A structure. Ancient, and I sense fear and anger." As they pushed through the last of the underbrush, a massive temple complex came into view. Its stone walls were overgrown with vines, but even in the fading light, they could see intricate carvings depicting long-forgotten Yadaran rituals. Gary's device beeped softly. "The king's signature is coming from inside," he said. "But there's some kind of energy field interfering with our equipment." Nyla nodded, her warrior instincts kicking in. "We'll have to rely on more primitive methods from here on out. And my abilities..." As they approached the temple entrance, a shimmering barrier became visible, crackling with alien energy. Gary reached out cautiously, only to have his hand repelled by an invisible force. "Any ideas?" he asked, looking at Nyla. Her scales rippled with concentration as she studied the barrier. "There," she said, pointing to a series of symbols carved into the stone archway. "It's an ancient Yadaran script. I think it's keyed to respond to Yadaran biology." Without hesitation, Nyla pressed her scaled hand against one of the symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the barrier flickered and disappeared. Gary couldn't help but smile. "Impressive," he said, earning a quick grin from Nyla. As they entered the temple, the air grew thick with the scent of age and decay. Their footsteps echoed off the stone walls as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, guided by Nyla's empathic senses and the faint signal from their tracking devices. Suddenly, a shout echoed through the temple, followed by a pained cry that could only belong to King Zorn. Gary and Nyla exchanged a look of alarm before breaking into a run, the rest of the team close behind. They burst into a large central chamber, its walls lined with ancient Yadaran technology. In the center, strapped to a crude extraction device, lay King Zorn. His scales were pale, his breathing labored. Prince Kale stood over him, a look of frenzied desperation on his face as he manipulated the controls of the machine. "Step away from the king," Gary shouted, his weapon raised. Prince Kale whirled around, his eyes wild. "You don't understand," he hissed. "This is for the good of Yadra. We can't allow our future to be controlled by aliens." As Gary engaged in a tense standoff with the prince, Nyla moved silently around the edge of the chamber, her eyes fixed on King Zorn. With a swift movement, she reached the extraction device and began to work on freeing the king. Seeing his plans unraveling, Prince Kale made a desperate lunge for a nearby control panel. "If I can't have the hormone, no one will," he snarled, his hand hovering over a large, ominous button. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Gary saw the madness in the prince's eyes, the weakened form of King Zorn, and Nyla's determined face as she worked to free him. He knew that whatever happened next would shape the future of human-Yadran relations forever. With a deep breath, Gary prepared to make his move, acutely aware that the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Balance. With lightning-fast reflexes, Gary lunged forward, tackling Prince Kael just as his finger brushed the button. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, human and Yadran. "Now, Nyla!" Gary shouted, struggling to restrain the thrashing prince. Nyla's scales flashed as she completed the final sequence to deactivate the extraction device. King Zorn let out a weak groan as the machine powered down, his body sagging against the restraints. "We need to get him out of here," Nyla said, her voice tight with urgency as she began to carefully remove the tubes and wires connected to the king's body. Gary, still pinning Prince Kael to the ground, nodded to the rest of the team. "Secure the prince and any of his followers. We're taking them all back to the capital." As the team moved swiftly to carry out his orders, Gary rushed to help Nyla with King Zorn. The monarch's scales were pale and dull, his breathing shallow and erratic. "He's in bad shape," Nyla murmured, her empathic abilities sensing the king's distress. "We need to get him to Luna immediately." With utmost care, they lifted King Zorn onto a makeshift stretcher. As they emerged from the ancient temple, Gary activated his communication device. "Luna, prepare for emergency treatment. We have King Zorn, but he's critical." Prince Kael attempted a crude hormone extraction. Luna's voice crackled back, tense but determined. "Understood. I'm preparing the stabilizing agent now. Hurry." The journey back to the Yadran capital was a blur of motion and urgency. The team moved as quickly as they dared through the dense jungle, the unconscious form of King Zorn jostling gently on the stretcher between them. Behind them, a second group escorted the restrained Prince Kael and his captured supporters. As they neared the city outskirts, a medical transport was already waiting. Luna stood at the ready, her face tight with concentration, as she oversaw the king's transfer into the vehicle. "His hormone levels are dangerously unstable," she reported, quickly assessing the monarch's condition. "We need to get him to the palace medical facility immediately." The transport sped through the streets of the Yadran capital, its emergency signals clearing a path. Inside, Luna worked feverishly, monitoring King Zorn's vital signs and preparing her experimental stabilizing agent. Upon reaching the palace, a team of Yadran medical staff was waiting. They whisked King Zorn into a state-of-the-art treatment room, with Luna right beside them, barking orders and explanations in rapid succession. Gary and Nyla could only watch as Luna inserted the injection into King Zorn's primary circulatory system, the viscous blue liquid disappearing into his scaled flesh. "Now we wait," Luna said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and tension. The next few hours were an agonizing test of patience. Gary paced the corridor outside the treatment room, while Nyla sat motionless, her scales shifting in subtle patterns that betrayed her anxiety. Luna remained by King Zorn's side, her eyes flicking between the monarch and the array of monitoring devices surrounding him. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, King Zorn's vital signs began to stabilize. His scales regained some of their luster, and his breathing became deeper and more regular. "It's working," Luna breathed, allowing herself a small smile of relief. As if in response to her words, King Zorn's eyes fluttered open. He blinked slowly, his gaze focusing on Luna, then shifting to taking Gary and Nyla as they entered the room. "You saved me," he said, his voice weak but clear. Gary stepped forward, bowing his head slightly. "Your Majesty, we're relieved to see you recovering. How do you feel?" King Zorn attempted to sit up, wincing slightly. "I am alive, thanks to you all. Dr. Simpson, your expertise has once again proven invaluable to Yadra." Luna nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly at the praise. I'm just glad we were able to stabilize your condition, Your Majesty. But there's still much we need to understand about what happened. As if on cue, a Yadrin official appeared at the door. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but the High Council has called an emergency session to address recent events. They requested the presence of Ambassador Dixon to provide testimony. King Zorn nodded gravely. Of course. Ambassador, if you would be so kind as to represent us. I fear I am not yet strong enough to attend myself. Gary straightened, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. I would be honored, Your Majesty. I'll ensure the Council understands the full scope of what has transpired. As Gary prepared to leave for the Council session, Luna turned back to her patient. Your Majesty, with your permission, I'd like to continue my research into the royal hormone. The events of the past few days have raised new questions that could be crucial to both our peoples. King Zorn nodded, his eyes showing a mix of weariness and willpower. You have my full cooperation, Dr. Simpson. Whatever you need to further your research, it shall be provided. With a final nod to Nyla, who would remain to guard the king, Gary left for the High Council chambers. As he walked the ornate corridors of the Yadrin Palace, he couldn't help but feel that they were standing on the precipice of a new era in human-Yadrin relations. The decisions made in the coming days would shape the future of both their worlds. The High Council chamber was a cavernous room, its walls adorned with intricate murals depicting Yadrin history. As Gary entered, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him, not just those of the council members, but of the gallery filled with Yadrin citizens eager to hear about the recent turmoil. Taking a deep breath, Gary stepped forward to address the council, ready to recount the harrowing events that had brought them to this moment. As he began to speak, he knew that his words would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of human-Yadrin relations. As Gary concluded his testimony, a hush fell over the High Council chamber. The gravity of the situation was palpable, and the council members exchanged worried glances. Before any discussion could begin, the chamber doors burst open. A breathless Yadrin aide rushed in, scales flickering with urgency. Esteemed council, forgive the interruption, he gasped. We've just received word that a high-level delegation from Earth has entered Yadrin space. They request an immediate audience. The council chamber erupted into a flurry of whispers and exclamations. Gary felt a knot form in his stomach. This unexpected development could complicate an already delicate situation. Over the next few hours, the Yadrin capital transformed into a hive of activity. The Earth delegation, led by Ambassador Marcus Stern, arrived with an entourage of diplomats, scientists, and security personnel. Gary observed their landing from a palace balcony, noting the determined set of Stern's jaw as he disembarked. This could change everything, Nyla murmured beside him, her scales shimmering with concern. Gary nodded grimly. Stern's known for his aggressive tactics. We'll need to tread carefully. As the Earth delegation settled into their quarters, Gary received an urgent summons from Luna. He found her in her makeshift laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays of data. Gary, you need to see this, Luna said, her eyes wide with excitement and trepidation. She gestured to a complex molecular model rotating above her workstation. I've been analyzing water samples from the remote Yadrin colonies affected by that mysterious illness. Look at this. Gary leaned in, squinting at the intricate display. What am I looking at, Luna? Trace amounts of the royal hormone, she explained, her voice tight. It's in the water supply, Gary, likely from natural underground deposits. This could explain the widespread effects we've been seeing. The implications hit Gary like a physical blow. If this gets out... Luna nodded gravely. It could upend everything we thought we knew about Yadrin biology and social structure. Their conversation was interrupted by a chime from Gary's communication device. It was a message from King Zorn's office, requesting his presence for an urgent meeting. When Gary arrived at the king's private chambers, he found the monarch engaged in a heated discussion with Princess Zyra. Their scales flashed in agitation as they argued in hushed tones. King Zorn noticed Gary's arrival and gestured for him to approach. "Ambassador Dixon, thank you for coming. We find ourselves at a crossroads." Princess Zyra turned to Gary, her eyes blazing with commitment. "My father intends to abdicate the throne in my favor," she explained. "But there's opposition from within the High Council." King Zorn nodded wearily. Counselor Draz leads a conservative faction that believes Zyra's progressive views make her unsuitable. They propose Prince Vorn as an alternative. Gary's mind raced, considering the implications. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, this decision could have far-reaching consequences for Yadran-human relations." Before they could delve deeper into the discussion, a palace aide burst into the room. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, bowing hastily. "But there's been an incident at one of the human research facilities on the outskirts of the capital." Gary felt his heart sink. What kind of incident? The aide's scales paled. "An attack, Ambassador, by a group of extremist Yadarans." The room fell silent as the weight of this news settled upon them. Gary exchanged a look with Princess Zyra, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. King Zorn straightened, his voice firm despite his recent ordeal. "We must respond to this immediately. Ambassador Dixon, I need you to liaise with your people and ensure their safety. Princess Zyra, convene an emergency session of the High Council." As Gary hurried from the room, his mind whirled with the rapid-fire developments. The Earth delegation's arrival, Luna's discovery, the succession crisis, and now this attack. It felt like the carefully balanced relations between humans and Yadarans were teetering on a knife's edge. He found Nyla waiting for him in the corridor, her expression grim. "I heard about the attack," she said. "My intelligence network is already gathering information." Gary nodded, grateful for her support. "We need to get to the research facility. Can you arrange transport?" As they rushed through the palace, Gary's communication device chimed again. It was a message from Ambassador Stern, requesting an immediate meeting. Gary hesitated, torn between his duty to respond to the attack and the diplomatic necessity of meeting with Stern. The decisions he made in the coming hours could shape the future of both their species. With a deep breath, he turned to Nyla. "Change of plans. We need to split up. Can you go to the research facility and assess the situation? I have to meet with Stern." Nyla nodded, her scales rippling with understanding. "Be careful, Gary. Stern's reputation precedes him." As they parted ways, Gary couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of a new era in human-Yadaran relations. Whatever happened next will reverberate across both their worlds for years to come. Gary's meeting with Ambassador Stern was tense from the moment he stepped into the ornate conference room. Stern's piercing gaze fixed on Gary as he took his seat across the polished table. "Ambassador Dixon," Stern began, his voice clipped and cold, "I hope you understand the gravity of our current situation." Gary nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Of course, Ambassador. The attack on the research facility has escalated tensions significantly." Stern leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "It's more than just the attack, Dixon. Your involvement with the Yadarans has not gone unnoticed. Your loyalties seem increasingly divided." The accusation hung in the air between them. Gary felt a knot form in his stomach, but he maintained his composure. "My loyalty to Earth has never wavered, Ambassador. I'm simply doing my job to foster positive relations with the Yadarans." "Relations that seem to have become quite personal," Stern retorted, his eyes narrowing. "I'll be blunt, Dixon. You need to decide where your true allegiance lies. Either you align fully with Earth's interests, or I'll have no choice but to recommend your immediate recall. The ultimatum hit Gary like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to respond, but Stern cut him off with a wave of his hand. I don't need your answer now, but I expect it soon. Remember, Dixon, your duty is to Earth first and foremost. As Gary left the meeting, his mind raced with the implications of Stern's ultimatum. His thoughts were interrupted by an urgent message from Nyla. Gary, we have a situation at the research facility. You need to get here now. Without hesitation, Gary made his way to the facility on the outskirts of the Yadran capital. The scene that greeted him was one of chaos. Smoke billowed from a damaged section of the building, and Yadran security forces had formed a perimeter around the area. Nyla appeared at his side, her scales flickering with tension. The extremist group struck again. They've taken hostages, including several human scientists. Gary's eyes hardened. Luna? She's safe, Nyla assured him. But trapped in her lab. We need to get her and the others out. As they formulated a rescue plan, Gary couldn't help but notice the seamless way he and Nyla worked together. Their complementary skills and unspoken understanding spoke volumes about their deepening bond. They moved swiftly through the facility, Nyla's Yadran physiology allowing her to navigate areas too narrow for Gary. As they approached Luna's lab, they encountered resistance from the extremists. Gary ducked as an energy blast sizzled past his head. Nyla reacted instantly, her tail whipping out to disarm the attacker. Gary followed up with a swift takedown, securing the extremist with restraints. Nice move, Nyla said, her scales shimmering with admiration. They reached Luna's lab to find her barricaded inside, working feverishly at her console. Luna, we need to go, Gary called out as Nyla worked to bypass the security lockdown. Just a moment, Luna replied, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. I can't leave this data behind. It's too important. As the door slid open, Luna grabbed a data crystal and joined them. I've made a breakthrough, she explained as they hurried through the corridors. I've developed a compound that can neutralize the royal hormone in Yadra's ecosystem without harming Yadran physiology. Gary's eyes widened at the implications. That's incredible, Luna. But we need to focus on getting out of here alive first. They made their way through the facility, evading or subduing extremists as they encountered them. Gary and Nyla's teamwork was flawless, each anticipating the other's moves as if they'd trained together for years. As they reached the exit, a final group of extremists blocked their path. Gary felt a surge of protectiveness as he positioned himself in front of Luna and Nyla. We don't want to hurt you, he called out to the extremists. Let us pass, and we can end this peacefully. The lead extremist, a tall Yadran with battle-scarred scales, stepped forward. You humans have no place here. Your presence corrupts our world. Nyla moved to Gary's side, her voice firm. We are not your enemies. Can't you see that this violence only breeds more conflict? For a tense moment, it seemed the standoff would erupt into violence. Then, slowly, the extremist leader lowered his weapon. Go, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. But know that this isn't over. As they emerged from the facility, Gary was struck by the realization that the challenges they faced were far from perseverance. The political landscape of Yadra was shifting rapidly, and the decisions made in the coming days would shape the future of both their worlds. With Luna's breakthrough, the extremist attacks, and Stern's ultimatum weighing heavily on his mind, Gary knew that the true test of his loyalties and convictions lay ahead. As he exchanged a meaningful look with Nyla, he couldn't help but wonder how their deepening connection would influence the choices he would soon have to make. As he exchanged a meaningful look with Nyla, he couldn't help but wonder how their deepening connection would influence the choices he would soon have to face. The aftermath of the research facility attack left little time for reflection. As Gary, Nyla, and Luna regrouped in a secure location, they began piecing together the disparate threads of information they'd gathered. The attack, the succession crisis, Luna's discovery about the royal hormone. It's all connected, Gary said, pacing the room. We're dealing with a conspiracy far larger than we initially thought. Luna nodded, her eyes bright with commitment. My data suggests that the contamination of remote Yadrin colonies wasn't accidental. Someone's been deliberately manipulating the hormone levels in the water supply. Nyla's scales flickered with concern. But to what end? Control, Gary replied grimly. Whoever's behind this wants to manipulate Yadra's political future. As they discussed their findings, an encrypted message arrived from one of Nyla's intelligence contacts. It contained coordinates for a hidden facility on the outskirts of the capital, along with reports of unusual activity and missing persons. This could be where they're holding the kidnapped individuals, Nyla said, her tail twitching with anticipation. Gary's teeth gritted with purpose. We need to investigate, but we can't go through official channels. We don't know who we can trust. Luna held up the data crystal she'd salvaged from her lab. I have everything we need to expose the truth. We just need to get inside that facility. As night fell over the Yadrin capital, Gary, Luna, and Nyla approached the heavily guarded compound. The facility's imposing structure loomed before them, a maze of high walls and energy barriers. Gary stepped forward, adjusting his diplomatic insignia. Let me handle this first part, he whispered to his companions. Approaching the main gate, Gary adopted an air of authoritative impatience. Ambassador Dixon, here on urgent business for Ambassador Stern, he announced to the guards. I don't have time to explain the security oversight that led to my credentials being misplaced. Contact your superiors if you must, but I warn you, the delay won't be looked upon kindly. The guards exchanged uncertain glances before reluctantly allowing them to pass. As they moved deeper into the compound, Nyla took point, her warrior instincts on high alert. There, she whispered, indicating a control panel. The facility's main security hub. If I can disable it, we'll have a clear path inside. While Nyla worked on the security systems, Luna approached a sealed door with a complex biometric lock. She pulled out a small device of her own design, calibrated to mimic both human and Yadrin biosignatures. This should do the trick, Luna murmured, her fingers dancing across the device's interface. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a vast underground laboratory. The sight that greeted them confirmed their worst fears. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a captive, some human, some Yadrin, all in various states of unconsciousness. By the stars, Nyla breathed, her scales paling. Gary's eyes narrowed as he recognized some of the faces. There are key political figures here from multiple factions. And look, some of these Yadrins show signs of genetic modification. Luna rushed to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. I'm accessing their research database. This goes beyond simple kidnapping. They've been experimenting on these individuals, manipulating their hormone production on a cellular level. As Luna worked to download the facility's data, Gary and Nyla began freeing the captives. The process was slow and delicate, each stasis pod requiring careful deactivation to avoid harming its occupant. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Intruder alert! Security breach in Sector 7. Gary's heart raced as he turned to his companions. We've been made. We need to move. Now. As if on cue, a squad of armed guards burst into the laboratory. Gary and Nyla moved in perfect synchronization. Years of unspoken trust and shared experiences culminating in this moment. Nyla's tail whipped out, disarming the first guard while Gary ducked under an energy blast, rolling to tackle another. They fought back-to-back, human and Yadrin, their styles complementing each other flawlessly. Luna, meanwhile, continued her frantic data transfer. "Just a few more seconds," she called out over the chaos. As Gary and Nyla held off the guards, a familiar figure stumbled into the lab. Dr. Vex, his scales dull and his eyes wide with fear. "Ambassador Dixon," Vex exclaimed, "you must listen to me. I had no idea the extent of their plans. They used my research, twisted it for their own purposes. I can help you expose the truth." Before Gary could respond, a new voice cut through the din. "I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Dr. Vex." Ambassador Stern strode into the laboratory, flanked by a contingent of Earth security forces. His eyes were cold as he surveyed the scene. "Dixon, I'm disappointed. I gave you a chance to choose the right side. Now, I have no choice but to have you arrested for treason." Gary stood tall, his drive unwavering. "The only treason here is against the principles we claim to uphold, Stern. You're part of this conspiracy, manipulating an entire planet for your own gain." Stern's expression hardened. "You're naive, Dixon. This is about securing Earth's future, ensuring our place in the galaxy. Sometimes, hard choices must be made." "Not like this," Gary retorted. "Not by betraying everything we stand for." As Stern's forces moved to surround them, Nyla caught Gary's eye. With a subtle nod, she signaled towards a ventilation shaft near the far wall. In one fluid motion, Nyla used her tail to sweep the legs out from under the nearest guards while Gary grabbed Luna and the data crystal. They sprinted for the shaft, Dr. Vex stumbling after them. "Stop them!" Stern roared, but it was too late. As they crawled through the narrow confines of the ventilation system, Gary's mind raced. They had the evidence, but getting it to King Zorn and the High Council before the referendum began would be a challenge. Emerging onto the streets of the Yadran capital, Gary knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of human-Yadran relations. With Stern and his forces in pursuit, they had to move quickly. "We need to get to the palace," Gary said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's time to expose this conspiracy once and for all." As they raced through the pre-dawn streets, the weight of their discovery pressed heavily upon them. The truth they carried had the power to reshape the future of both their species, but only if they could survive long enough to reveal it. As they raced through the pre-dawn streets, the weight of their discovery pressed heavily upon them. The truth they carried had the power to reshape the future of both their species, but only if they could survive long enough to reveal it. Suddenly, the sky above them darkened ominously. A massive storm system, rare for Yadra's usually temperate climate, rolled in with frightening speed. Wind whipped through the streets, carrying debris and forcing the group to shield their eyes. "We need to find shelter," Nyla shouted over the howling gale. "This storm will make it impossible to reach the palace." Gary nodded grimly, scanning their surroundings. His eyes landed on an ancient structure looming in the distance. "There," he pointed, "that temple complex. It should be sturdy enough to wait out the storm." They sprinted toward the weathered stone edifice, its intricate carvings barely visible in the dim light. As they reached the entrance, a deafening crack of thunder split the air, and rain began to pour in sheets. Luna stumbled inside, clutching the precious data crystal to her chest. "That was close," she gasped, catching her breath. Dr. Vex, who had been trailing behind them, finally caught up. "I recognize this place," he wheezed. "It's an ancient temple dedicated to Yadra's early scientific pursuits. We should be safe here." As they ventured deeper into the temple, the group split up to explore their temporary refuge. Gary and Nyla found themselves alone in a secluded chamber, its walls adorned with faded murals depicting Yadran anatomy. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Their eyes met, and in that moment the fear, exhilaration, and pent-up attraction of the past few days came rushing to the surface. Without a word, they moved towards each other. Gary's hand tentatively reached out, tracing the iridescent scales along Nyla's arm. She shivered at his touch, her tail curling around his leg. "Gary," Nyla whispered, her voice husky. "I've never—" with a human. He pulled her close, feeling the alien yet familiar contours of her body against his. "We'll figure it out together," he murmured. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, and they gave in to their desires, exploring the boundaries of human Yadran intimacy. It was awkward at times, but also tender and deeply connecting. As they lay together afterward, Gary marveled at the turn his life had taken. Meanwhile, in another part of the temple, Luna had set up a makeshift workstation. She pored over the data they'd stolen, her brow furrowed in concentration. As she dug deeper into the files, her eyes widened in shock. "Oh no," she breathed. "This is bigger than we thought." When Gary and Nyla rejoined the group, Luna shared her discovery. "The conspiracy extends beyond Yadra and Earth," she explained, her voice tight with urgency. "There's a megacorporation involved, Galacticorp. They're manipulating the royal hormone situation across multiple star systems." Dr. Vex paled at the news. "Galacticorp? But they have their tentacles in everything from terraforming to interstellar transport. If they're behind this, then we're dealing with an enemy far more powerful than we imagined," Gary finished grimly. As the storm finally began to subside, they prepared to leave the temple. The streets of the capital were in chaos when they emerged. Crowds surged through the thoroughfares, some protesting, others simply trying to make sense of the conflicting information flooding the public channels. "The news of the conspiracy must have leaked," Nyla said, her scales shifting anxiously. They fought their way through the throngs, dodging angry demonstrators and panicked citizens alike. As they approached the High Council chambers, they saw Princess Zyra addressing a group of agitated council members. "Your Highness," Gary called out, pushing through the crowd. "We have critical information about the conspiracy." Princess Zyra's eyes widened as she recognized them. "Ambassador Dixon? How did you dash?" "There's no time to explain," Luna interrupted, holding up the data crystal. "We need to present this evidence immediately." Inside the chambers, they laid out everything they had discovered, the kidnappings, the genetic experiments, and the involvement of Galacticorp. The council members listened in stunned silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "This threatens not just Yadra, but the sovereignty of countless worlds," Princess Zyra said, her voice steel. "We must act decisively." Prince Vorn, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "As much as it pains me to admit it, we cannot face this threat alone. We need allies." "A joint human-Yadran task force," Gary suggested, "to investigate and combat Galacticorp's influence." As the council debated this unprecedented proposal, an alert came through on Nyla's comm device. "Ambassador Stern is attempting to flee the planet," she reported. "Go," Gary told her. "Take a team and bring him in. We need every piece of information we can get." Nyla nodded sharply and rushed out, her warrior training kicking in as she assembled a pursuit team. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The Joint Task Force was approved, with Gary appointed as its leader. Luna took on the role of Chief Scientific Advisor, her expertise crucial in unraveling Galacticorp schemes. As they prepared for their first mission, infiltrating a suspected Galacticorp facility on a nearby moon, Gary found a moment alone with Nyla, who had returned triumphant from capturing Stern. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, acutely aware of how their relationship had shifted. Nyla's scales shimmered with purpose. "Ready as I'll ever be. We're in uncharted territory now, Gary, in more ways than one." He nodded, understanding the double meaning in her words. As they turned to join the others, the weight of their task settled on Gary's shoulders. They were about to embark on a mission that could reshape the galaxy, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. beginning of their mission to uncover the full extent of Galactic Corp's operations. As they boarded their ship, a sleek vessel designed for both stealth and combat, Gary couldn't shake the feeling that they were venturing into something far more dangerous than they had initially anticipated. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but he drew strength from the determined faces of his companions. Their preparations were interrupted by the sudden arrival of a cloaked figure on the landing pad. As the figure approached, Gary tensed, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. But Nyla held up a hand, her scales shifting in recognition. "Wait," she said, her eyes narrowing. "I know her." The figure lowered her hood, revealing the iridescent scales of a Yadaran female. Her eyes darted nervously around the hangar as she approached. "I am Zara," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I have information that could change everything you think you know about Galactic Corp." Gary exchanged a glance with Luna, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "We're listening," he said cautiously. Zara's revelation about Galactic Corp's synthetic royal hormone and its dangerous side effects sent shockwaves through the team. The implications were staggering, a potential galaxy-wide health crisis that could affect countless species. "We need to modify our plan," Gary announced, his mind racing with the new information. "Luna, Nyla, you'll form a secondary team. Your objective is to locate and secure samples of the synthetic hormone. We need to analyze it, understand what we're dealing with." Luna nodded, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "If we can get our hands on those samples, we might be able to develop a countermeasure." As they finalized their new strategy, Gary couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. The stakes had just been raised exponentially, and the margin for error was razor-thin. Their journey to the moon was far from smooth. The asteroid field they had to navigate to avoid detection proved to be a gauntlet of near misses and heart-stopping moments. Gary's ship took a glancing blow from a rogue asteroid, causing alarms to blare throughout the cockpit. "We're venting atmosphere," Nyla called out, her claws flying over the control panel. Gary gritted his teeth, maneuvering the ship through the debris. "Can you seal it?" Working in tandem, they managed to patch the hull breach, their movements in perfect sync despite the chaos around them. As they worked, Gary couldn't help but be acutely aware of Nyla's presence, the brush of her scales against his skin sending shivers down his spine. When they finally emerged from the asteroid field, the Galactic Corp facility came into view. It was a sprawling complex that dominated the moon's surface, a city unto itself dedicated to the corporation's nefarious research. "By the stars," Luna breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the scale of the operation. Gary set his jaw, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "Remember, we're here to gather evidence and disrupt their operations. Stay focused, stay alert." As they approached the facility's outer perimeter, Gary's team activated their stealth systems, a combination of Earth technology and Yadaran cloaking devices. They slipped past the first line of defenses undetected, the facility's automated systems oblivious to their presence. Inside, the true scale of Galactic Corp's operation became apparent. Endless corridors lined with labs and production facilities stretched out before them. Gary led his team deeper into the complex, gathering incriminating data at every turn. Meanwhile, Luna and Nyla's team encountered their own challenges. The vault containing the synthetic hormone samples was a fortress within a fortress, guarded by state-of-the-art security systems. "We need to bypass that biometric lock," Luna whispered, eyeing the imposing door before them. Nyla's tail twitched in concentration as she studied the security panel. "I think I can trick the system, but it's going to take time." As Nyla worked, Luna kept watch, her nerves on edge. Just as the lock disengaged with a soft click, a piercing alarm shattered the silence. "We've been made!" Luna hissed, grabbing for the samples. The facility erupted into chaos. Advanced combat drones swarmed through the corridors, their weapons primed. genetically enhanced soldiers, their reflexes inhumanly fast, joined the hunt. Gary's team found themselves pinned down in a research lab, energy blasts sizzling past their heads. He ducked behind an overturned table, returning fire with his pulse rifle. "We need to reach Luna and Nyla," he shouted over the din of battle. As they fought their way through the facility, Gary marveled at the effectiveness of their joint human-Yadran force. Earth's advanced weaponry complemented the Yadran's natural agility and strength perfectly. They finally rendezvoused with Luna and Nyla in a vast atrium, surrounded on all sides by Galactic Corp forces. As they took cover behind a row of massive columns, Luna's face was pale with shock. "Gary, you need to see this," she said, holding out a data pad with trembling hands. The information on the screen made Gary's blood run cold. Galactic Corp wasn't just producing a synthetic hormone. They were combining it with DNA from various species, including humans. "They're playing God," Nyla growled, her scales darkening with anger. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to process them fully. Galactic Corp's forces were closing in, and they needed to act fast. Gary made a split-second decision. "Everyone else, get to the extraction point with the evidence. Luna, Nyla, you're with me. We're going to make sure this facility never produces another drop of that hormone." As the rest of the team fought their way to safety, Gary led Luna and Nyla deeper into the heart of the complex. They placed explosive charges at key structural points, each one bringing them closer to crippling Galactic Corp's operations. The final charge was set in the main production facility, a cavernous space filled with vats of the synthetic hormone. As Gary armed the explosive, a squad of enhanced soldiers burst through the doors. "Go!" Gary shouted, laying down covering fire as Luna and Nyla sprinted for the exit. They raced through the corridors, the entire facility now on high alert. Alarms blared and security doors slammed shut behind them, barely missing Nyla's tail. As they approached their extraction point, the first explosions rocked the complex. The floor beneath their feet trembled, and the air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and chemicals. Gary's heart pounded in his chest as they rounded the final corner. Their ship was just ahead, its engines already warming up for a rapid departure. But between them and freedom stood a line of Galactic Corp's most elite soldiers, their weapons trained on the trio. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Gary looked at Luna, her brilliant mind already calculating their odds. He turned to Nyla, seeing the fierce persistence in her eyes. In that instant, he knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. With a shared nod of understanding, they prepared to make their final push towards a ship and whatever future awaited them beyond this moon. The fate of not just Earth and Yadra, but countless worlds across the galaxy, hung in the balance as they faced this last, desperate challenge. Gary's pulse quickened as he assessed their options. The line of elite soldiers stood between them and freedom, their weapons trained on the trio. Just as Gary was about to signal for a desperate charge, a voice crackled through their comms. "Ambassador Dixon, this is Dr. Alara. I can help you escape. There's a hidden access panel to your left, disguised as part of the wall. Input the code 7-3-9-4-1. Gary hesitated for a split second, then made a decision. "Luna, the panel," he whispered urgently. As Luna's fingers flew over the concealed keypad, Nyla provided cover fire, her scales rippling with tension. The wall slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow passage. "Go!" Gary shouted, laying down suppressing fire as Luna and Nyla ducked into the opening. He followed, the panel sliding shut just as a barrage of energy blasts scorched the spot where they had been standing. They found themselves in a dimly lit corridor, face to face with a slender woman in a lab coat. Her eyes were sharp and alert, darting between the three of them. "I'm Dr. Alara," she said quickly. I've been working undercover within Galacticorp. We don't have much time. Gary's hand didn't leave his weapon. Why should we trust you? Because I have something you need, Illyra replied, pulling out a data crystal. This contains information on a new strain of the royal hormone, one that can be safely synthesized without side effects. Luna's eyes widened. That's impossible. The complexity of the hormone dash. I'll explain later. Illyra cut her off. Right now, we need to move. Follow me. They raced through a maze of corridors, the sounds of alarms and distant explosions growing louder. Illyra led them to a sealed laboratory door, her fingers flying over the access panel. As the door slid open, Gary's jaw dropped. The lab was filled with advanced equipment, holographic displays showing complex molecular structures hovering in the air. This is where I've been conducting my research, Illyra explained, hurriedly gathering samples and data crystals. With this, we could solve the hormone scarcity problem without exploiting the Yadran royal family. Luna moved to help her, her scientific curiosity evident. The implications of this are staggering, she murmured. Suddenly, the facility shook violently. Nyla steadied herself against a lab bench. We need to go. Now. As if in response to her words, a metallic voice echoed through the complex. Emergency protocols activated, initiating facility-wide lockdown. Gary cursed under his breath. Doctor, is there another way out of here? Illyra nodded grimly. There is, but it won't be easy. They left the lab, Illyra guiding them through increasingly treacherous areas of the facility. They encountered automated defense turrets, forcing Gary and Nyla to work in tandem to disable them. In one corridor, noxious gas began to flood the space. Luna quickly improvised a filtration system, using lab equipment they'd brought from Illyra's research center. As they navigated a section with fluctuating gravity, Gary couldn't help but be impressed by how seamlessly their team had integrated Illyra. Luna and the doctor worked together to bypass complex security measures, their shared scientific knowledge proving invaluable. They were making progress, but Gary could sense that something was off. The resistance they were encountering seemed almost designed. His suspicions were confirmed when they turned a corner and found themselves facing a holding area filled with captive aliens from various species. What is this? Nyla hissed, her scales darkening with anger. Illyra's face was a mask of shame. Test subjects for the hormone treatments and genetic experiments. Gary felt a cold fury building inside him. He knew that freeing these prisoners would complicate their escape immeasurably, but he couldn't leave them behind. We're getting them out, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. As they worked to release the captives, alarms blared throughout the facility. Galacticorp security forces would be on them in minutes. Luna, Illyra, start working on a way to get these people to our ship, Gary ordered. Nyla, you're with me. We need to hold off the security forces. As Gary and Nyla took up defensive positions, he caught her eye. There was a fierce willpower there, but also something else. Something that made his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the impending battle. The first wave of Galacticorp forces hit them like a tsunami. Enhanced soldiers and combat drones flooded the corridor, their weapons unleashing a storm of energy blasts. Gary and Nyla moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other as they fought to protect the escaping prisoners. Luna's voice crackled over the comm. Gary, we've got a problem. The reactor core is going critical. If it blows, it'll take out half the moon. Gary's mind raced. They needed to escape, protect the prisoners, and now prevent a catastrophic meltdown. He looked at Nyla, saw the same realization in her eyes. We'll have to split up, he said, his voice heavy. Luna, Illyra, get the prisoners to the ship. Nyla and I will head to the reactor core. As they prepared to part ways, Gary felt a moment of hesitation. There was so much he wanted to say to Nyla, But there was no time. They shared a look that conveyed more than words ever could, then turned to face their respective challenges. Gary and Nyla fought their way through the facility, the countdown to disaster ticking away in their minds. As they approached the reactor control room, they encountered their most formidable opponent yet, Commander Vex, the facility's head of security. Vex was a hulking figure, cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the emergency lighting. "You've caused quite a mess," he growled, activating his arm-mounted energy blade. "Time to clean it up." What followed was the most intense fight of Gary's life. He and Nyla moved as one, their styles complementing each other perfectly. But Vex was a juggernaut, his enhanced strength and advanced weaponry pushing them to their limits. As they battled, the reactor's warnings grew more urgent. They were running out of time. In a desperate move, Nyla used her tail to trip Vex, giving Gary the opening he needed. He landed a crushing blow, sending the commander crashing into a control panel in a shower of sparks. With Vex down, they raced to the reactor controls. Gary's heart sank as he saw the extent of the damage. "The automated shutdown isn't working," he said, frantically working the controls. "Someone's going to have to stay behind to manually complete the process." Nyla's scales shifted, a determined look in her eyes. "I'll do it. My physiology gives me a better chance of surviving the radiation." Gary felt as if his heart was being torn in two. "No," he said fiercely. "I won't leave you behind." They stood there, the reactor's warnings blaring around them, facing a decision that would shape not only their own fate, but the future of human-Yadran relations and the fight against Galactic Corp. In that moment, with alarms screaming and the facility crumbling around them, Gary and Nyla's eyes met. Everything they had been through, everything they felt for each other, hung in the balance. The choice they made now would change everything. Everything they felt for each other hung in the balance. The choice they made now would change everything. Gary's mind raced, processing the situation in microseconds. He couldn't leave Nyla behind, but he also couldn't sacrifice their mission. In that instant, a daring plan formed in his mind. "We do this together," Gary said, his voice firm with grit. "We can complete the shutdown as a team." Nyla's scales rippled with surprise, then settled into a pattern of grit. "How?" Gary quickly outlined his plan, gesturing to the various control stations. "We'll work in tandem. Your enhanced strength and agility can handle the physical overrides, while I manage the system inputs. We've fought together. Now let's save lives together." Without wasting another second, they sprang into action. Nyla bounded across the room, her powerful tail whipping behind her as she began manually disengaging safety locks. Gary's fingers flew over the control panels, his eyes darting between multiple screens as he input override codes. The reactor's warning klaxons grew more insistent, the very air seeming to vibrate with the imminent danger. Sweat beaded on Gary's forehead as he raced against time, calling out instructions to Nyla. "Coolant valve 7. We need to reroute it." Nyla leaped to the indicated panel, her claws deftly manipulating controls meant for human hands. "Done," she shouted back. They moved in perfect synchronization, their earlier battles having honed their ability to anticipate each other's moves. As Gary input the final sequence, Nyla used her full strength to throw a massive lever. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, resonant thrum, the reactor began powering down. The warnings fell silent, replaced by the groaning of settling machinery. Gary allowed himself a brief sigh of relief before reality set in. "We need to move. This place is coming apart." As if to emphasize his point, a support beam crashed down nearby, showering them with sparks. Nyla grabbed Gary's arm, pulling him towards the exit. "This way." They raced through the disintegrating facility, their path illuminated by emergency lighting and the occasional shower of sparks. Gary's lungs burned as he pushed himself to keep up with Nyla's superior speed and agility. A massive tremor shook the facility, causing the floor to buckle beneath their feet. Gary stumbled, but Nyla's quick reflexes saved him from falling into a newly formed chasm. "Thanks," he gasped, regaining his footing. Nyla's reply was cut short by the screech of tearing metal. A section of the ceiling collapsed ahead of them, blocking their path. "No!" Gary shouted, frantically searching for an alternative route. Nyla's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. Without a word, she backed up several paces, then charged forward. Using her powerful legs, she launched herself at the wall beside the debris, rebounding off it to clear the obstacle. Landing on the other side, she immediately turned back to Gary. "Jump!" she called, extending her arms. Gary hesitated for only a fraction of a second before taking a running leap. He soared through the air, time seeming to slow as he reached the apex of his jump. For a moment, he feared he wouldn't make it. Then Nyla's strong hands grasped his, pulling him to safety just as the floor where he had stood crumbled away. They didn't pause to catch their breath, instead pressing on through the maze of collapsing corridors. Gary's comlink crackled to life, Luna's voice barely audible over the din of destruction. "Gary, we've reached the extraction point with the prisoners, but the moon's surface is destabilizing. We need to leave now." "Copy that," Gary replied between labored breaths. "We're on our way. Be ready for immediate takeoff." As they neared the exit, a new sound reached their ears, the whine of energy weapons. They rounded a corner to find a group of Galactic Corp scientists desperately trying to escape with cases of equipment and data. Nyla's scales darkened with anger. "The hormone samples," she growled. "We can't let them leave with those." Gary nodded grimly. "I'll clear a path to the ships. You stop them." They split up, Gary laying down suppressing fire to drive back the Galactic Corp security forces, while Nyla charged the scientists. Her movements were a blur as she weaved through energy blasts, closing the distance in seconds. The lead scientist raised a weapon, but Nyla was faster. She disarmed him with a swipe of her tail, then used her momentum to tackle another who was trying to flee with a case of samples. The remaining scientists, seeing their colleagues fall, dropped their equipment and ran. Nyla scooped up the cases, her powerful muscles easily handling the weight. "Got them," she called to Gary. They sprinted the final distance to the landing pad, where their ship's engines were already burning hot, ready for takeoff. Luna stood at the entrance ramp, waving them on urgently. "Hurry," she shouted, her eyes wide with fear as she looked past them. Gary glanced back, and his heart nearly stopped. A massive sinkhole was opening up, swallowing the facility and rapidly approaching their position. The very ground beneath their feet began to tremble and crack. With a final burst of speed, Gary and Nyla leaped onto the ship's ramp. Luna slammed her hand on the control panel, raising the ramp as Gary shouted to the pilot, "Go! Go! Go!" The ship lifted off, its engines straining against the planet's crumbling surface. Through the viewports, they watched as the Galactic Corp facility disappeared into the gaping maw of the sinkhole, taking with it the evidence of its horrific experiments. But their ordeal was far from finished. As they broke atmosphere, the ship's sensors blared a new warning. Luna's face paled as she read the display. "Galactic Corp orbital defenses have been activated," she reported. "They're targeting all ships leaving the moon." Gary strapped himself into the co-pilot seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Evasive maneuvers. We need to coordinate with the other ships. Nyla, get on the comms. We're going to have to work together to break through their defenses." As energy beams lanced through space around them, the ragtag fleet of escaping ships began to form up. Gary's mind raced, formulating a plan to get them all to safety. The battle was won, but the war was far from finished. Their next moves would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of human-Yadran relations and the balance of power in the galaxy. As the fleet of escaped ships maneuvered through the barrage of energy beams, Gary's hands flew across the control panel, coordinating their evasive actions. Nyla's voice rang out over the comms, relaying instructions to the other vessels. All ships, form up in Delta formation. We'll create a shield wall with our combined energy barriers, she commanded, her tone steady despite the chaos around them. The ragtag group of vessels fell into formation, their energy shields overlapping to create a formidable defense against the orbital weaponry. Gary guided their ship to the lead position, taking the brunt of the assault. "Luna, what's our status?" Gary called over his shoulder, his eyes never leaving the swirling starfield before them. "Shields at 62% and holding," Luna reported, her fingers dancing across her own control panel. "We're approaching the hyperspace threshold. 30 seconds to jump capability." The ship shuddered as a particularly powerful blast struck their shields. Gary gritted his teeth, making a series of quick adjustments to maintain their course. 20 seconds. Luna counted down. Nyla's tail twitched nervously as she monitored the status of the other ships. 2 vessels reporting critical shield levels. "We need to buy them more time." Gary nodded, a plan already forming. "Understood. All ships, prepare for a corkscrew maneuver on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute." The fleet spun into action, each ship rotating on its axis while maintaining the protective formation. The sudden shift in their flight pattern threw off the targeting systems of the orbital defenses, giving them the precious seconds they needed. Jump capability achieved. Luna shouted triumphantly. "All ships, punch it," Gary ordered. In a brilliant flash of light, the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the Galacticorp defenses firing uselessly into empty space. As the adrenaline of their narrow escape began to subside, Gary turned to his team. "Great work, everyone. We made it." Nyla approached, her scales shimmering with a mix of excitement and concern. "We're not out of danger yet. We need to warn Yadra about Galacticorp's plans." As if on cue, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A holographic image of Princess Zyra materialized before them, her usually composed features marred by evident distress. "Gary, Nyla, thank the stars you're alive," she said, her voice tense. "We have a critical situation here on Yadra." The princess quickly briefed them on the coup led by Counselor Draz and the precarious political situation. Gary and Nyla exchanged worried glances as they absorbed the gravity of the news. "We'll need to alter our approach," Gary said, his mind already racing through potential strategies. "Princess, do you have any allies we can trust?" Zyra nodded. "Captain Zealous commands an outpost loyal to the Crown. I'm transmitting the coordinates now. He'll provide you with safe harbor and up-to-date intelligence." As the transmission ended, Gary turned to his team. "Change of plans. We're going in quiet." Hours later, their ship touched down at the remote Yadran outpost. Captain Zealous, a tall, imposing Yadran with deep blue scales, greeted them as they disembarked. "Welcome to Outpost Zeta," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We don't have much time. Follow me to the command center." As they walked, Luna pulled Gary aside. "Gary, Dr. Alara and I need to analyze the hormone samples we retrieved. We might find something crucial." Gary nodded. "Go ahead. Nyla and I will work with Captain Zealous on a plan to retake the capital." In the command center, holographic maps of the capital city sprang to life. Captain Zealous pointed to key locations, outlining the isolation's defenses and potential weak points. "The palace is heavily guarded," Zealous explained, "but there's an ancient network of tunnels beneath the city. They're known only to the royal family and their most trusted allies." Nyla's eyes lit up with recognition. "The Whisperways. I thought they were just a legend. Gary leaned in, studying the tunnel layout. This could work. A small team could infiltrate the city undetected. We could be at the heart of the capital before they even know we're there. As they continued to refine their plan, Luna burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement and worry. "Gary, you need to see this," she said, activating a nearby hollow projector. Complex molecular structures appeared in the air before them. The hormone samples. They're not just synthetic versions of Yadran hormones. They've been engineered to enhance empathic abilities on a massive scale. The implications hit Gary like a physical blow. They're creating a way to manipulate emotions across entire populations. Nyla's scales darken with anger. Draz and his isolationists. They might be unwitting pawns in Galacticorp's game. Captain Zealous's expression hardened. This changes everything. We need to move quickly. Gary nodded, his drive strengthening. Agreed. Nyla and I will lead the strike team through the Whisperways. Luna, you and Dr. Lara keep working on understanding these hormones. If there's a way to counter their effects, we'll need it. As the others left to prepare, Gary found himself alone with Nyla. The weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them both. Nyla, Gary started, his voice soft. I know we haven't had much time to talk about us, about what's been growing between us. Nyla's scales shimmered with a mix of emotions. Gary, Before she could finish, an alarm blared through the outpost. Captain Zealous's voice came over the intercom, urgent and sharp. Isolation forces detected on approach. All personnel battle stations. Gary and Nyla locked eyes. The moment broken, but the connection between them stronger than ever. We'll continue this conversation later, Gary said, his hand briefly touching Nyla's arm. She nodded, her tail swishing with dedication. Let's go save your world and mine. Together, they raced from the room, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their fight for Yadra's future and the fate of human-Yadran relations. Relations and the fate of human-Yadran cooperation. The outpost erupted into a flurry of activity as personnel rushed to their stations. Gary and Nyla sprinted to the command center, where Captain Zealous was already coordinating the defense. Status report, Gary demanded, his eyes scanning the tactical displays. Multiple assault craft inbound, Zealous reported grimly. They'll breach our perimeter in minutes. As if on cue, the first impacts shook the outpost. Alarms blared, and the acrid smell of smoke began to fill the air. We need to evacuate, Nyla said, her tail lashing anxiously. We can't lose the hormone samples or the data we've gathered. Gary nodded, his mind racing. Agreed. But we can't just run. We need a plan. As if in answer to his words, the command center's door slid open, revealing a group of Yadran officials and military officers. Their scales shimmered with a mix of persistence and apprehension. We're here to help, announced the lead Yadran, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. We've seen the truth of Counselor Draz's actions and can no longer support his regime. Gary exchanged a quick glance with Nyla, reading the surprise and hope in her eyes. This unexpected support could change everything. Welcome aboard, Gary said, extending his hand. We'll need all the help we can get. As the newcomers integrated into the defense efforts, Luna burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. We've done it, she exclaimed, holding up a vial of silvery liquid. Dr. Lara and I have synthesized a counteragent to the hormone. It should neutralize its effects on King Zorn and the affected military personnel. Gary's eyes widened at the implications. This could be the key to turning the tide. How much do we have? Enough for the king and key military leaders, Luna replied. But it's unstable. We need to administer it within hours. The pieces of a plan began to fall into place in Gary's mind. He turned to the assembled group, his voice clear and commanding. "Listen up, everyone. We're going to launch a three-pronged assault on the palace. Captain Zealous, you'll lead the main force in a frontal assault on the gates. It'll be a diversion, but make it look good." Zealous nodded, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "We'll give them a show they won't forget." Gary turned to the defected Yaterans. "You know the palace better than anyone. Can you get us inside?" The lead Yateran stepped forward. "There are secret passages unknown to Draz. We can infiltrate and disable the internal security systems." "Perfect," Gary said. "Nyla and I will lead a small team to find and extract King Zorn. Luna, you and Dr. Ilera will come with us. We'll need you to administer the counteragent as soon as we find the king." As the groups dispersed to prepare, Gary pulled Nyla aside. "This is it," he said softly. "Are you ready?" Nyla's scales shimmered with a mix of emotions. "I was born ready," she replied, her tail brushing against his arm. "Let's save my world." Under the cover of darkness, the plan was set in motion. Captain Zealous's forces launched a thunderous assault on the palace gates, the roar of repurposed mining equipment tearing through the night air. Explosions lit up the sky, drawing the attention of Draz's forces. Meanwhile, Gary and Nyla's team, cloaked in advanced stealth technology, slipped through the chaos. They followed the defected Yaterans through hidden passages, their hearts pounding with each step closer to the heart of the palace. They encountered their first real resistance in a dimly lit corridor. A patrol of hormone-enhanced guards, their eyes unnaturally bright, blocked their path. Nyla moved like lightning, her enhanced strength allowing her to disable 2 guards before they could even react. Gary and the others quickly subdued the rest, using non-lethal takedown methods to avoid raising alarms. As they pressed deeper into the palace, the team of defected officers successfully disabled the main security grid. Sections of the complex plunged into darkness, and the constant hum of surveillance equipment fell silent. Gary and Nyla led their team through the newly created blind spots, their progress swift and silent. But as they approached the area where King Zorn was believed to be held, they stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden behind a false wall, they discovered a state-of-the-art laboratory. Holographic displays flickered with molecular structures that Gary recognized all too well. "This is Galactic Corp Tech," he whispered, his fists clenching. "Draz has been working with them directly." Nyla's scales darkened with anger. He's betrayed everything Yadra stands for. Before they could investigate further, they overheard voices approaching. Gary quickly ushered the team into hiding, straining to listen. "The king is secure in the sublevel safe room," a gruff voice said. "Counselor Draz wants him moved before dawn." Gary's pulse quickened. They had their target. As soon as the voices faded, he relayed the information to Captain Zealous, who promised to intensify the assault on the main gates. The team fought their way to the sublevel, facing increasingly difficult resistance. Elite, hormone-enhanced soldiers guarded a choke point, forcing Gary to use their last stun grenades to clear a path. Finally, they reached the safe room, only to find it sealed with a biometric lock. Nyla stepped forward, her eyes closing in concentration. Gary watched in amazement as her scales shifted, mimicking the emotional patterns they'd observed in Draz. The lock hesitated for a moment, then clicked open. Inside, they found King Zorn, his once regal bearing diminished but not broken. Luna rushed forward with the counteragent, administering it with practiced efficiency. Just as hope began to surge through the team, alarms blared throughout the palace. Draz's voice, filled with rage, echoed through the complex. "Intruders in the sublevel. Seal all exits." Heavy blast doors slammed shut, trapping Gary, Nyla, and the newly liberated King Zorn in the safe room. The sound of approaching guards grew louder, and Gary realized they were out of options. It was then that King Zorn revealed the room's final secret. He pressed a hidden panel, revealing a sleek escape pod. "This can get you to safety," the king said, his voice weak but determined. "But it only has room for two." Gary's mind raced, assessing their options. The king pressed a data crystal into his hand. "This contains evidence of Galacticorp's full involvement. It must reach the Galactic Council." The sounds of Draz's forces grew closer. Gary looked at Nyla, then at King Zorn, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The fate of Yadra, perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. With time running out, Gary knew he had to make a choice, and fast. Gary's mind raced as he weighed their limited options. The sound of approaching guards grew louder, their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors. With a pained expression, he locked eyes with Nyla, silently communicating their next move. "Your Majesty," Gary said, turning to King Zorn, "we need you to stay here. We'll come back for you, I promise." The king nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Go. The future of Yadra depends on you now." Gary and Nyla squeezed into the cramped escape pod, their bodies pressed close together in the confined space. As the pod's door sealed shut, Gary activated the launch sequence. With a violent jolt, they were propelled into the tunnel, burrowing through Yadra's crust at breakneck speed. The pod's interior was dimly lit, casting a soft glow on Nyla's scales. Gary could feel the warmth of her body against his, their hearts pounding in unison as the pod raced through the planet's layers. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the intensity of their connection overwhelmed them both. "Nyla, Gary began, but his words were cut short as the pod erupted from the ground, launching them into a dense, forested area far from the capital city. As the pod's door hissed open, Gary and Nyla stumbled out, their legs unsteady from the wild ride. They quickly scanned their surroundings, alert for any signs of pursuit. "We need to move," Nyla said, her tail swishing anxiously. "Draz will have search parties combing the area soon." Gary nodded, pulling out a compact holomap. "There's a resistance outpost about 20 kilometers northeast of here. If we push hard, we can make it before dawn." They set off to the lush Yadran jungle, the unfamiliar flora casting strange shadows in the moonlight. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, Gary's mind raced with possibilities. The data crystal felt heavy in his pocket, its contents potentially world-changing. After several hours of grueling travel, they heard voices ahead. Gary and Nyla crouched low, approaching cautiously. Through the foliage, they saw a group of Yadran civilians huddled together, fear evident in their shimmering scales. Nyla stepped forward, her empathic abilities reaching out to the group. "It's all right," she said softly. "We're here to help." The refugees, a mix of adults and children, looked up with hope in their eyes. An elderly Yadran spoke, his voice trembling. "We fled the capital when the fighting broke out. We have nowhere to go." Gary exchanged a glance with Nyla, knowing they couldn't abandon these people. "We're heading to a safe location," he said. "You're welcome to join us, but we need to move quickly and quietly." As they resumed their journey, now with a group of civilians in tow, the challenges multiplied. The terrain grew more difficult, with steep inclines and treacherous ravines. Gary took point, scouting for the safest path, while Nyla brought up the rear, her heightened senses alert for any signs of pursuit. Midway through their trek, a Yadran child stumbled, twisting her ankle. Without hesitation, Gary scooped her up, carrying her on his back. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by Nyla, whose scales shimmered with a mix of admiration and something deeper. As dawn broke, they finally reached the hidden resistance base. Luna and Dr. Lara rushed out to meet them, their faces a mix of relief and urgency. "Thank the stars you made it," Luna exclaimed, embracing Gary. "We were worried sick." Gary handed over the data crystal. "This contains everything we need to expose Galacticorp. What's our status?" Luna's expression turned serious. We've made a breakthrough with the counteragent. We can aerosolize it, potentially neutralizing the hormone's effects on a large scale. But we lack the equipment to produce it in sufficient quantities. As they gathered around a hollow table, analyzing the data crystal's contents, the full scope of Galactic Corp's conspiracy unfolded before them. The corporation had tendrils in governments across multiple star systems, manipulating political events to further their agenda of galactic dominance. This goes beyond Yadra, Nyla said, her scales darkening with anger. We need to get this information out to the entire galaxy. Gary nodded, a plan forming in his mind. The communications hub in the nearby city. If we can take control of it, we can broadcast this evidence planet-wide and beyond. As they began formulating their plan, an alarm blared through the base. Captain Zealous burst into the room, his face grim. We've detected a fleet of Galactic Corp ships entering Yadran space. They'll be here within hours. The news sent a ripple of tension through the group. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. We need to move now, Gary said, his voice filled with urgency. Nyla, work with Captain Zealous to organize a diversion at their landing zone. Luna, Dr. Alara, keep working on that counteragent. I'll lead the team to infiltrate the communications hub. As the base erupted into a flurry of activity, Gary pulled Nyla aside. Their eyes met, unspoken emotions passing between them. Nyla, I know this isn't the best time, but... Gary hesitated, then pushed forward. What's growing between us? It's real. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to explore this. Explore us. Nyla's scales shimmered with a kaleidoscope of colors. I feel it too, Gary. Whatever happens, we face it together. They shared a brief, intense moment of connection before duty called them back to their respective tasks. As they parted, both felt a renewed sense of purpose, their bond giving them strength for the challenges ahead. Under the cover of darkness, Gary led his team through the city's underground maintenance tunnels. The cramped, damp passages echoed with their careful footsteps as they approached the communications hub. Above ground, the sounds of battle could be heard as Nyla and Captain Zealous's forces engaged the newly arrived Galactic Corp troops. As they emerged from the tunnels near their target, Gary's comm link crackled to life. Nyla's voice came through, tense but controlled. Gary, be advised. Draz has fortified the hub with his elite guards. They're using the synthetic hormone. Be careful. Gary acknowledged the warning, signaling his team to move forward. As they approached the hub's perimeter, the true scale of their challenge became apparent. Heavily armed guards patrolled the grounds, their movements unnaturally swift and coordinated. Remember, Gary whispered to his team, these soldiers are enhanced, but they're not invincible. Use their aggression against them. With a series of hand signals, Gary coordinated their assault. They moved like shadows, using the cover of darkness and their knowledge of the hormone's effects to outmaneuver the guards. Non-lethal takedowns were executed with precision, each successful encounter bringing them closer to their goal. Inside the hub, they encountered a maze of security checkpoints and locked doors. Gary's fingers flew over control panels, his hacking skills put to the ultimate test as alarms blared around them. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, knowing that every second counted. As they neared the central control room, a squad of Draz's most elite soldiers intercepted them. The ensuing firefight was intense, with the enhanced soldiers displaying incredible strength and reflexes. Gary's team held their ground, their teamwork and strategy allowing them to slowly gain the upper hand. Just as they breached the final defenses, Luna's voice came over the comm link. Gary, we're here with the counteragent, ready to deploy on your signal. With a final push, Gary and his team burst into the control room. Technicians scrambled for cover as the resistance fighters secured the area. Gary rushed to the main console, his heart pounding as he prepared to broadcast the damning evidence to the entire planet and beyond. As his fingers hovered over the activation switch, the room suddenly fell silent. Gary looked up to see Counselor Draz himself standing in the doorway, flanked by a group of Galacticorp executives. The Counselor's eyes blazed with an unnatural intensity, the effects of the synthetic hormone evident in his enlarged pupils. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Mr. Thorne," Draz said, his voice dripping with false civility. "You've come so far, but your little rebellion ends here." Gary's hand remained poised over the console, the fate of Yadra and countless other worlds hanging in the balance. The standoff stretched into seconds, then minutes, as both sides waited for the other to make the first move. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder, a stark reminder of the larger conflict raging beyond the walls of the communications hub. In that tense moment, Gary's mind raced through their options, searching for a way to turn the tables on Draz and his Galacticorp allies. The weight of the galaxy seemed to rest on his next decision, with the lives of billions potentially affected by the choice he was about to make. The weight of the galaxy seemed to rest on his next decision, with the lives of billions potentially affected by the choice he was about to make. In that fraction of a second, Gary's fingers flew across the console. The room erupted into chaos as he initiated the broadcast, sending the incriminating data streaming to every connected device on Yadra and beyond. Draz's eyes widened in shock. "No!" he roared, lunging forward. But it was too late. The truth was out. Screens throughout the hub flickered to life, displaying damning evidence of Galacticorp's galaxy-wide manipulation. Gary's team formed a protective barrier around the console, weapons raised. Outside, the battle intensified. Nyla's voice crackled over the comlink, breathless but determined. "Gary, we're holding them off, but they're pushing hard. How much longer?" "Broadcast initiated," Gary replied, his eyes fixed on the progress bar. "Just need to keep them busy a little longer." As if on cue, Luna and Dr. Ilera burst into the control room, carrying bulky dispersal units. "We've got the counteragent," Luna shouted, her lab coat singed from the firefight outside. Dr. Ilera immediately began setting up the units around the room. Once activated, "This should neutralize the hormone's effects on Draz soldiers," she explained, her fingers flying over the controls. Draz enhanced guard surged forward, their movements unnaturally swift. Gary's team engaged them, the room filled with the sound of energy weapons and hand-to-hand combat. As the counteragent spread through the air, the effects were almost immediate. Several of Draz's soldiers stumbled, their enhanced reflexes faltering. Confusion spread across their faces as the synthetic hormone's influence waned. Draz, realizing his advantage was slipping away, reached into his coat and pulled out a small vial. "You think you've won?" he snarled, uncorking the container. "I still have the most potent version of the hormone. Once I take this, I'll—" His words were cut short as the room shook with a tremendous impact. A section of the wall crumbled, revealing a familiar figure striding through the dust and debris. "I believe that's quite enough, Counselor." King Zorn's voice rang out, flanked by his royal guards. The king's presence sent a ripple of shock through the room. Taking advantage of the distraction, Gary lunged forward, knocking the vial from Draz's hand. It shattered on the floor, the unstable hormone reacting violently with the air. Draz inhaled sharply, his eyes growing wide as the concentrated fumes took effect. Instead of granting him enhanced abilities, the unstable hormone caused Draz to stagger, clutching his head in agony. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, incapacitated by the very substance he had hoped would ensure his victory. As Draz's remaining forces surrendered, the screens around them confirmed the broadcast success. Reports flooded in from across Yadra and nearby systems, detailing the rapid spread of the information. King Zorn stepped forward, his regal bearing commanding the attention of all present. Gary, Thorne, Nyla, and all who fought alongside them, Yadra owes you a debt we can never fully repay. Your bravery has exposed a threat not just to our world, but to the entire galaxy. The king turned to address the cameras, still broadcasting from the hub. People of Yadra and all those across the stars who can hear me, today we have uncovered a great deception. But in doing so, we have also discovered the strength that comes from standing united against those who would seek to divide us. As the king's words spread hope across the planet, Gary's calmly chirped. Nyla's voice came through, tinged with both exhaustion and elation. Gary, the Galactic Corp ships are retreating. We've done it. Relief washed over Gary, but he knew their work was far from finished. Reports were already coming in of unrest on other worlds affected by Galactic Corp schemes. King Zorn, seeming to sense Gary's thoughts, placed a hand on his shoulder. This victory is significant, but it's only the beginning. Galactic Corp's influence spreads far beyond Yadra. We need a team capable of tracking down their remaining operations and bringing them to justice. The king's eyes moved from Gary to Nyla, who had just entered the room, her scales shimmering with fatigue and pride. I can think of no one better suited to lead such an effort than the two of you. Gary and Nyla exchanged a look, volumes passing between them in that silent moment. The prospect of continuing their mission, of working together to unravel the full extent of Galactic Corp's conspiracy, filled them both with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the chaos of the battle subsided and the work of rebuilding began, Gary found a quiet moment with Nyla. They stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. "So," Gary said, his voice soft, "ready to take on the galaxy?" Nyla's scales shimmered with a kaleidoscope of colors. "As long as we're doing it together," she replied, her tail brushing against his hand. Their fingers intertwined, a gesture that bridged their two species and held the promise of challenges and discoveries to come. As they looked out over the awakening city, both knew that their journey was only just beginning. In the command center below, Luna and Dr. Alara were already poring over data, preparing for the monumental task ahead. Captain Zealous coordinated with King Zorn's forces, establishing new security protocols to prevent any lingering Galactic Corp influence. The newly formed Interstellar Task Force was taking shape, with representatives from affected worlds already reaching out to offer support and resources. The scope of their mission was daunting, but the team that had come together on Yadra was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Gary and Nyla rejoined the others, the atmosphere was charged with purpose. Maps of distant star systems flickered on screens around them, each representing a potential Galactic Corp stronghold to be investigated. "Where do we start?" Luna asked, looking up from her datapad. Gary studied the galaxy map, his mind racing with possibilities. "We follow the money," he said, pointing to a cluster of systems known for their valuable resource deposits. Galactic Corp's operations always lead back to profit. We track their resource chains. We find their hidden bases. Nyla nodded in agreement, her tactical mind already formulating strategies. "We'll need to move carefully. Even with their main operation exposed, Galactic Corp still has powerful allies. We can't afford to tip our hand too early." As the team delved into planning their first move, the weight of their task settled over them. They were no longer fighting for just one world, but for the future of the entire galaxy. The challenges ahead were immense, but so was their persistence to see justice done. With a shared look of purpose, Gary, Nyla, and their team turned their full attention to the mission at hand, ready to take their first steps into a larger universe of intrigue, danger, and the fight for galactic freedom. Freedom. The team's spirits were high, buoyed by their recent victory and the promise of bringing justice to the galaxy. Their celebration was cut short by a sudden, violent tremor that shook the command center. Alarms blared as screens flickered to life, displaying chaos unfolding in Yadra's orbit. "We're under attack," Captain Zealous shouted, his scales flashing warning colors. Multiple hostiles targeting our orbital defense stations. Gary rushed to the main console, fingers flying over the controls. The display showed a swarm of unmarked ships swarming Yadra's orbital defenses. Galactic Corp loyalists, he growled, recognizing the attack patterns. King Zorn strode into the room, his regal bearing unmarred by the urgency of the situation. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Nyla, I need you to lead a counteroffensive immediately. We cannot allow these stations to fall. Nyla nodded, her body already coiling with tension. We'll need a mixed team, humans and Yadarans working together. Agreed, Gary said, mind racing through tactical options. Luna, can you gather our best techs? We'll need their expertise to regain control of the station systems. As Luna dashed off, Nyla turned to Captain Zealous. I need your most skilled warriors. We'll be fighting in zero-G conditions. The next hours were a blur of preparation. Gary and Nyla worked in seamless tandem, their complementary skills creating a formidable command duo. They assembled a diverse team, combining human technical expertise with Yadaran physical prowess. In the ship's hangar, Nyla led an intensive training session, demonstrating zero-G combat techniques to the mixed squad. Gary watched in admiration as she moved with fluid grace, her scales shimmering with focused intensity. The key is to use your environment, Nyla explained, demonstrating a complex maneuver that sent her ricocheting off multiple surfaces. In space, everything is a potential launch point or shield. As the human team members struggled to adapt, Gary stepped in. Think of it like swimming, but in 3 dimensions, he added, demonstrating a modified version of Nyla's technique that played to human strengths. Working together, they gradually molded the disparate group into a cohesive unit. As the training intensified, Gary and Nyla found themselves drawn closer, their movements synchronizing with an almost telepathic precision. Just as the team was reaching peak readiness, Luna burst into the hangar, her eyes wide with excitement. Gary, Nyla, I've made a breakthrough, she exclaimed, brandishing a data pad. The royal hormone. I think I can use it to enhance interspecies communication. It could give humans limited empathic abilities, similar to Yadarans. Gary's eyebrows shot up. That could be a game changer for the mission. But is it safe? Luna nodded vigorously. I've run every simulation possible. The effect should be temporary, but it could give us a crucial edge. Nyla's scales rippled with cautious optimism. It's a risk, but one that could turn the tide in our favor. With time running short, they made the decision to proceed. Luna administered the modified hormone to the human team members, while Gary and Nyla made final preparations for the assault. As they boarded the retrofitted Yadaran shuttles, Gary felt a strange tingling at the edges of his consciousness, the first signs of the hormone taking effect. He caught Nyla's eye, and for a moment, he could have sworn he felt a flicker of her emotions. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the star-studded expanse of space. Ahead, Yadra's orbital stations hung like besieged castles, swarming with enemy ships. Remember your training, Gary said over the comms as their small fleet accelerated towards the conflict. Work together, trust your instincts, and watch each other's backs. As they closed in on the nearest station, the full scale of the battle became apparent. Galactic Corp forces had entrenched themselves deeply, turning the station's own defenses against incoming Yadaran ships. Nyla, take your stealth unit and infiltrate the core, Gary ordered. We'll draw their fire and create an opening for you. Nyla's shuttle peeled away, activating its cloaking technology as Gary led the main assault. The space around the station erupted into a dazzling, deadly light show of energy weapons and explosions. Inside the station, Nyla's team encountered fierce resistance. Galactic Corp soldiers moved with unnatural speed and strength, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. They've used a hormone on themselves, Nyla realized with a jolt. She reached out with her empathic senses, trying to disorient the enemy, but the effort left her drained and vulnerable. Outside, Gary's team fought their way through waves of enemy fighters. The human members of his squad, bolstered by Luna's hormone treatment, displayed an uncanny ability to anticipate enemy movements. Gary himself felt a growing awareness, a sense of connection to his team that went beyond normal human perception. As the battle raged, Gary sensed a sudden spike of distress. Without fully understanding how, he knew it was Nyla. Fighting down a surge of panic, he ordered his team to push harder, to create a path to the station's core. Inside, Nyla found herself face-to-face with a towering figure, Victor Reeves, the Galacticorp executive leading this assault. His eyes blazed with hormone-enhanced fury as he charged towards her. Just as Reeves was about to strike, Gary burst into the room, his body moving with a fluid grace that matched any Yadaran. The two men clashed in a furious battle, their enhanced abilities turning the confrontation into a blur of movement. Nyla, recovering her strength, reached out with her empathic abilities. To her surprise, she found she could connect not just with her Yadaran allies, but with the human members of the team as well. Using this newfound link, she coordinated a final, decisive push. The combined human Yadaran force surged forward, overwhelming the remaining Galacticorp loyalists. Gary, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and empathic energy, finally managed to subdue Reeves. As the last of the enemy forces surrendered, Gary and Nyla found themselves alone in the station's control room. The lingering effects of the hormone amplified the emotional intensity of the moment. Without a word, they came together in a passionate embrace, their connection transcending physical and empathic boundaries. In the aftermath of the battle, as they began to process the captured Galacticorp data, the true scope of their mission became clear. The corporation's tendrils reached further than they had ever imagined, implicating governments across the galaxy. King Zorn, upon hearing their report, made a momentous decision. "We need a permanent force to combat this threat," he declared. "A joint human Yadaran fleet, with you two at its head." Gary and Nyla exchanged a look, feeling the weight of the responsibility being placed on them. The challenges ahead were daunting, but as their hands clasped together, they knew they were ready to face whatever the galaxy might throw at them. As they stood on the observation deck of the reclaimed station, looking out at the stars, Gary felt a new sense of purpose filling him. "So," he said softly, "ready to take on the galaxy?" Nyla's scales shimmered with a kaleidoscope of emotions. "As long as we're doing it together," she replied, her tail wrapping gently around his waist. The vastness of space stretched out before them, filled with untold dangers and wonders. But for Gary and Nyla, leaders of this new interstellar alliance, it was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. The vastness of space stretched out before them, filled with untold dangers and wonders. But for Gary and Nyla, leaders of this new interstellar alliance, it was just the beginning of their greatest adventure. Their first major challenge came swiftly. As they settled into their roles aboard the flagship of the joint human Yadaran fleet, intelligence reports flashed across their screens, revealing the existence of a hidden Galacticorp base on a remote, icy planet named Glacius 4. "This could be it," Gary said, his eyes scanning the data. "A key production facility for the synthetic hormone." Nyla's scales rippled with anticipation. "If we can shut this down, we'll deal a significant blow to Galacticorp's operations." The fleet set course for Glacius 4, a journey that would take several days. During that time, Gary and Nyla worked tirelessly to integrate the diverse crews of their ships. They organized joint training exercises where human and Yadaran soldiers learned to complement each other's strengths. In the ship's mess hall, Gary watched as a group of human engineers huddled around a Yadaran weapons specialist, fascinated by the intricacies of their energy-based weaponry. Nearby, a human chef was attempting to recreate a popular Yadaran dish, much to the amusement and appreciation of a scaled audience. "It's working," Nyla said, appearing beside him, Slowly, but it's working. As they approached Glacius 4, the mood aboard the ship turned tense. The icy planet loomed before them, a pale blue orb shrouded in swirling white clouds. But something was off. Energy readings are off the charts, Luna reported from her station. There's some kind of shield surrounding the entire planet. Gary leaned forward, studying the readouts. Looks like it's powered by a network of satellites. We can't get through to the surface while that's active. Nyla's tail swished thoughtfully. We need to take out one of those satellites. Disable it from the inside. Agreed, Gary nodded. I'll lead a small team. We'll need someone who can hack their systems quickly. I know just the one, Nyla said, her scales shimmering with a hint of pride. Zara, one of our best. She can slice through their encryption like it's nothing. As preparations for the infiltration began, Luna approached Gary with an excited gleam in her eye. I've got something that might help, she said, holding up a vial of shimmering liquid. A new application of the hormone enhancer. It should allow you to withstand Glacius Ivy's extreme cold without bulky gear. Gary eyed the vial warily, remembering the intense effects of their previous encounter with the hormone. Any side effects I should know about? Luna shook her head. It's temporary and localized. You'll maintain your normal body temperature, regardless of the external conditions. With the plan set, Gary's team boarded a small, cloaked shuttle. As they approached the chosen satellite, a GalactiCorp cruiser passed dangerously close, forcing them to power down all non-essential systems and drift silently through space. Once aboard the satellite, they encountered a maze of narrow corridors lined with automated defenses. Laser grids and motion sensors forced them to move with painstaking care. Zara, the Yadaran hacker, proved her worth immediately, her fingers dancing across her portable interface as she disabled security measures one by one. We're in, Zara whispered as the doors to the main control room slid open. Inside, they found a skeleton crew of GalactiCorp personnel caught completely off guard. A brief, intense firefight ensued, with Gary and his team making quick work of the enemy. As Zara worked to disable the shield, Gary uncovered data files that made his blood run cold. This isn't just a production facility, he reported back to Nyla. They're working on a permanent version of the hormone, something that could alter entire species irreversibly. Before Nyla could respond, alarms blared throughout the satellite. They've detected us, Zara called out, her scales flashing with urgency. I've almost got the shield down, but... A violent shudder ran through the station. On the monitors, Gary watched in horror as the satellite began to break from its orbit, plummeting towards Glacius Ivy's surface. Everyone, get to the shuttle, Gary ordered. I'll stay behind and guide this thing away from populated areas. As his team evacuated, Gary fought with the satellite's controls, using every bit of piloting skill he possessed to alter its trajectory. Through their empathic link, he felt Nyla's surge of fear and dedication. Suddenly, the view screen filled with the image of a Yadaran cruiser, expertly piloted to intercept the falling satellite. A tractor beam lanced out, enveloping the doomed station in a field of energy. Did you really think I'd let you have all the fun? Nyla's voice crackled over the comms. With the shield down and Gary safely recovered, the full might of the human Yadaran fleet descended upon Glacius 4. The sky above the GalactiCorp base erupted in a dazzling display of weapons fire as ships from both species worked in perfect harmony. On the ground, Gary and Nyla led the assault team towards the heart of the facility. The icy wind howled around them, but thanks to Luna's treatment, Gary moved as easily as if it were a warm spring day. Together, they carved a path through waves of enhanced GalactiCorp soldiers, their movements a deadly dance of human adaptability and Yadaran grace. As they fought their way deeper into the base, the true horror of GalactiCorp's experiments became clear. Holding tanks filled with grotesque, half-formed creatures lined the walls, a testament to the corporation's disregard for life in its quest for power. At last, they reached the central laboratory, where they came face to face with Dr. Mara Vex, the architect of GalactiCorp's most insidious plans. The scientist stood before a massive tank, her hand hovering over a release valve. "One more step," she snarled, "and I'll flood this entire facility with an experimental hormone. Who knows what it'll do to you, or to your precious alliance." Gary and Nyla exchanged a glance, volumes passing between them in an instant. As one, they moved, their actions perfectly synchronized through their empathic bond. Gary dove low, drawing Vex's attention, while Nyla's tail whipped out, knocking the scientist's hand away from the valve. In the ensuing struggle, alarms blared and warning lights flashed. The fate of not just a mission, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance as Gary and Nyla fought to subdue Dr. Vex and secure the dangerous hormone before it could be released. Gary lunged forward, tackling Dr. Vex to the ground, while Nyla swiftly secured the valve. The scientist thrashed and snarled, but Gary's enhanced strength easily subdued her. "It's over, Vex," Gary said, his voice firm as he restrained her. "Your experiments end here." Nyla's scales rippled with a mix of relief and concern as she surveyed the lab. "We need to secure this facility immediately. There's no telling what other dangers lurk here." As if on cue, the room filled with the sound of boots on metal as the rest of their team burst in, weapons at the ready. Luna rushed to the control panels, her fingers flying over the keyboards as she initiated emergency containment protocols. "All clear," she announced after a tense moment. "The hormone is secure, and I've locked down all the experimental chambers." Over the next few hours, the joint human-Yadran fleet worked tirelessly to dismantle the GalactiCorp installation. Teams of scientists and security personnel combed through every level, cataloging evidence and securing dangerous materials. Gary and Nyla oversaw the operation, their enhanced abilities allowing them to coordinate the complex task with unprecedented efficiency. As the cleanup neared completion, Gary's communicator chirped urgently. "Incoming transmission from King Zorn," he told Nyla, his brow furrowing. Marked as highest priority, they retreated to a quiet corner of the facility, activating the holographic display. King Zorn's image flickered to life, his usually composed features marred by obvious distress. "Gary, Nyla," the king began without preamble, "we have a dire situation. A group of rogue Yadran scientists, led by Dr. Kira Zen, has stolen a sample of the royal hormone from our palace laboratories." Nyla's scales paled. "That's impossible. The security measures." "Were bypassed," Zorn interrupted. "Dr. Zen is brilliant, but unstable. Our intelligence suggests she and her team are attempting to combine the royal hormone with elements of the synthetic GalactiCorp version." Gary felt a chill that had nothing to do with Glacius Ivy's frigid atmosphere. "The potential for abuse is staggering," he said, mind racing through the possibilities. "Precisely," Zorn nodded grimly. "You must track down Dr. Zen and recover the stolen sample before it can be weaponized. Time is of the essence. The unstable nature of the combined hormones could lead to catastrophic results if not properly contained." As the transmission ended, Gary and Nyla exchanged a determined look. They quickly assembled a specialized task force, drawing on the diverse skills of their crew. Luna joined for her scientific expertise, while Zara's hacking abilities would be crucial. They also recruited a new team member, Marcus Graves, a human ex-GalactiCorp security expert with intimate knowledge of the corporation's black market networks. Their investigation led them to Nova Proxima, a frontier world teeming with smugglers and black market traders. The spaceport was a riot of sights, sounds, and smells, a melting pot of species from across the galaxy, all drawn by the promise of profit and anonymity. Using Marcus's underworld contacts, they arranged a meeting with one of the lieutenants of an infamous arms dealer known only as the Broker. Gary and Nyla pose as potential buyers, their enhanced empathic link allowing them to present a flawless facade of ruthless interest. In a dimly lit back room of a seedy cantina, they sat across from a scarred Thoraxian, his multiple arms folded menacingly across his chest. "So," he rasped, compound eyes gleaming, "you're in the market for some specialized biological compounds?" Gary leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "We hear you're the ones to talk to about cutting-edge bioweapons. Something new, something transformative." As they spoke, Zara worked her magic. Hidden in their ship, she sliced through the broker's communications network with surgical precision. After several tense minutes, she whispered triumphantly in their earpieces, "Got it. Secret lab location locked. Abandoned mining complex on Nova Proxima's moon." With the information secured, Gary and Nyla smoothly extracted themselves from the meeting. "We'll be in touch," Nyla purred, her scales shimmering with calculated menace. They wasted no time mobilizing their team. As their ship approached Nova Proxima's desolate moon, Gary's enhanced reflexes were put to the test. The space around the moon was littered with cloaked mines, a deadly obstacle course designed to shred unwary vessels. "I can sense them," Nyla said, her eyes closed in concentration. 3 degrees to port. Now starboard hard. Gary's hands danced across the controls, the ship weaving through the minefield with breathtaking precision. Luna and Marcus clung to their seats, faces pale, while Zara worked feverishly to jam any signals from the mines to the base. They touched down on the moon's barren surface, the abandoned mining complex looming before them like a rusted wound in the gray landscape. As they prepared to disembark, Luna distributed breather masks. "The atmosphere's thin but breathable," she explained. "These will filter out any potential contaminants." The team moved out, Gary and Nyla taking point. They hadn't gone far when the first shots rang out, security forces armed with prototype weapons that crackled with unknown energy. "Cover!" Gary shouted, diving behind a twisted piece of mining equipment. Nyla was already moving, her tail lashing out to disarm the nearest attacker, while her hands brought up her own weapon to return fire. The battle was fierce but brief. Gary and Nyla's enhanced abilities, combined with their team's diverse skills, quickly overwhelmed the security forces. They fought their way deeper into the complex, the corridors becoming a maze of flashing emergency lights and blaring alarms. Finally, they reached the main research lab. Through the reinforced glass, they could see a wild-eyed Yadaran female, Dr. Kira Zen, frantically working at a central console. Beside her, a swirling vortex of iridescent gas churned within a containment field. "Stop right there, Dr. Zen," Gary called out as they burst into the lab. "It's over." Zen whirled to face them, her scales flashing with a manic intensity. "You don't understand," she screeched, her hand hovering over a large red button. "This is the key to our evolution. With this, we can transcend the limits of our biology." "You're playing with forces you can't control," Nyla said, her voice calm but firm. "That combination is unstable. It could have unforeseen consequences for both our species." Before Zen could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "I couldn't agree more," it said, smooth as silk and cold as ice. "Which is why I'll be taking it off your hands." They turned to see a tall, elegantly dressed human standing in the doorway, flanked by heavily armed guards. His smile was charming, his eyes utterly ruthless. "The broker, I presume," Gary said, his muscles tensing for action. The broker's smile widened. In the flesh. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of my acquisition?" As if in answer, a stray energy bolt from one of the guard's weapons struck the containment field. With a sound like shattering glass, the field collapsed, releasing a cloud of shimmering gas into the lab. "No!" Luna cried out, scrambling for her equipment. The hormone, It's been aerosolized. Gary and Nyla, caught in the center of the spreading cloud, felt a familiar surge of power coursing through their bodies. Their senses sharpened, the world around them seeming to slow as their neurons fired with impossible speed. Through their intensified empathic link, a single thought passed between them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. As the broker's forces raised their weapons and Dr. Zen lunged for a console, Gary and Nyla moved as one, their enhanced bodies coiling with newfound strength, ready to. For action, the cloud of aerosolized hormone enveloped them, its shimmering particles dancing in the air like microscopic fireflies. Time seemed to slow as Gary and Nyla's enhanced senses kicked into overdrive. They moved with preternatural speed, dodging energy bolts and disarming the broker's guards before anyone could react. Dr. Zen, caught off guard by the sudden burst of action, stumbled back from her console. "Luna, seal the room," Gary shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos with crystal clarity. Luna's fingers flew across her portable device, activating the lab's emergency containment protocols. Blast doors slammed shut, trapping everyone inside. The broker, his composure slipping, reached for a concealed weapon. Nyla's tail whipped out, knocking it from his hand before he could even aim. "I wouldn't," she hissed, her scales rippling with impossibly strong energy. With the immediate threat neutralized, Gary turned to Dr. Zen. "We need to stabilize that hormone now. How do we contain it?" Zen's eyes darted between Gary, Nyla, and the swirling remains of the hormone cloud. I don't know. This combination was theoretical. I never expected." "Figure it out," Nyla snapped, her enhanced empathy sensing the scientist's genuine panic. For the next hour, they worked feverishly to contain and neutralize the aerosolized hormone. Luna and Dr. Zen collaborated on a makeshift filtration system, while Gary and Nyla used their heightened abilities to assist, moving with incredible speed and precision. Finally, the air cleared and the immediate danger passed. The broker and his men were secured, and Dr. Zen's research was contained. As the adrenaline faded, Gary and Nyla exchanged a look of concern. "We need to get back to Yadra," Gary said, feeling the lingering effects of the hormone coursing through his system. "King Zorn needs to know about this." The return journey to Yadra was tense. Gary and Nyla underwent constant monitoring, their vitals fluctuating as their bodies adjusted to the enhanced hormone's effects. Their empathic link deepened, thoughts and emotions flowing between them with startling clarity. Upon reaching Yadra, they were immediately whisked away to a secure medical facility. A team of human and Yadaran doctors subjected them to a battery of tests, their expressions growing more concerned with each result. "Your cellular structure has been fundamentally altered," one Yadaran physician explained, her scales shifting in patterns of scientific fascination and worry. "The combination of the royal hormone and the synthetic variant has created something entirely new." King Zorn himself arrived to hear the full report. His usually composed features betrayed a mix of concern and guarded hope as he listened to the medical team's findings. "Your physical abilities have been significantly enhanced," a human doctor continued. "Strength, speed, reflexes, all off the charts. But it's your empathic connection that's truly remarkable. It's as if your neural patterns have become intertwined." Gary and Nyla sat side by side, acutely aware of each other's presence. They could sense the unease radiating from the medical team and the terrifying anxiety of King Zorn. "What are the long-term implications?" Zorn asked, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. The lead physician shook her head. "Unknown, Your Majesty. This is uncharted territory. We need time to study." An urgent alert cut through the room, startling everyone. King Zorn's communicator buzzed insistently. He answered, his expression darkening as he listened. "Understood. Prepare a full briefing immediately." He turned to Gary and Nyla, his eyes grave. "We have a situation on Viros 3. A Yadaran colony has reported an outbreak of a mysterious illness affecting both our people and the human population there. Gary stood, feeling a surge of energy despite the hours of testing. What kind of illness? Rapid mutations, uncontrolled empathic outbursts. It's causing chaos in the colony. Zorn's gaze flickered between Gary and Nyla. Given your unique condition, I believe you may be our best hope for understanding and containing this outbreak. Nyla rose as well, her tail swishing with grit. We're ready, Your Majesty. Within hours, they were briefed and prepared for departure. Dr. Zen, now under close supervision, joined their team along with Luna and a mix of human and Yadaran medical personnel. As they boarded their ship, Gary felt a familiar thrill of anticipation, tempered by the weight of responsibility. The journey to Viros 3 was a race against time. In the ship's lab, Luna and Dr. Zen worked tirelessly, analyzing data from the colony and developing potential treatments. Gary and Nyla spent hours in the training simulator, pushing the limits of their enhanced abilities and deepening their empathic connection. As they approached Viros 3, the ship's long-range sensors blared a warning. A Galactic Corp blockade surrounded the planet, a ring of heavily armed vessels blocking their approach. Battle stations, Gary ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat. Nyla took her place beside him, their movements perfectly synchronized. The space around Viros 3 erupted into chaos as the human Yadaran fleet engaged the Galactic Corp ships. Energy beams crisscrossed the void, and explosions blossomed like deadly flowers against the backdrop of stars. Gary's enhanced reflexes allowed him to navigate the battlefield with uncanny precision. Nyla coordinated their fleet's movements, her empathic abilities giving her an intuitive grasp of their allies' positions and intentions. Together, they formed the spearhead of the assault, punching through the Galactic Corp lines. Ships exploded around them, but Gary wove through the debris field, pushing their vessel to its limits. "We're through," Nyla called out as they broke past the last line of defense. "Establishing landing coordinates now." As they entered Viros 3's atmosphere, the true scope of the crisis became apparent. The main colonial settlement was in chaos, with mutated colonists rampaging through the streets. Emergency beacons flashed, casting an eerie red glow over the scene. Gary brought their ship down in a cleared area on the outskirts of the settlement. As the loading ramp descended, he turned to his team. Luna, Dr. Zen, set up the field lab and start analyzing samples immediately. Nyla and I will lead the ground team to secure the area and contain the most severe cases. They moved out, the sounds of screams and destruction growing louder as they approached the colony center. Gary and Nyla took point, their enhanced senses on high alert. A group of mutated colonists burst from a nearby building, their bodies twisted and their eyes wild with uncontrolled empathic feedback. Without hesitation, Gary and Nyla sprang into action, moving with fluid grace to subdue the afflicted individuals without causing further harm. As they worked their way deeper into the settlement, securing areas for the medical teams to set up triage stations, Gary couldn't shake a gnawing sense of dread. The similarities between the colonists' condition and their own exposure to the enhanced hormone were too stark to ignore. "Nyla," he said through their empathic link, "I think we know what caused this." She nodded grimly, her scales rippling with a mix of anger and commitment. "Galactic Corp, they've weaponized the hormone." As if in response to their realization, a distant explosion rocked the colony. Gary's enhanced vision caught sight of a plume of smoke rising from the direction of the water treatment facility. "We need to move," he said aloud, alerting the rest of the team. "Whatever Galactic Corp's endgame is here, we can't let them destroy the evidence." With renewed urgency, they pressed forward into the heart of the chaos-stricken colony. The true test of their enhanced abilities and the strength of their bond was just beginning. The true test of their enhanced abilities and the strength of their bond was just starting. As they approached the water treatment facility, a cacophony of alarms blared through the colony. Gary's enhanced hearing picked up the distinct whine of Galacticorp ships entering the atmosphere. "Nyla, we need to split up," Gary said, his voice tense but focused. "You coordinate ground operations from the colony's control center. I'll take command of our fleet." Nyla nodded, her scales shimmering with perseverance. "Be careful up there," she said, her thoughts brushing against his mind. They parted ways, each racing to their respective posts. Gary sprinted to the nearest shuttle pad, his enhanced muscles propelling him at incredible speeds. Within minutes, he was aboard the fleet's flagship, assuming command of the bridge. "Status report," he barked, sliding into the captain's chair. "Galacticorp fleet approaching, sir," the tactical officer responded. "They've launched long-range missiles." Gary's mind raced, processing information at lightning speed. "Implement defensive pattern Alpha. Position our ships in a tight formation around the planet. Activate the enhanced planetary defense grid." As the human Yadran fleet moved into position, Gary felt a familiar presence in his mind. Nyla had reached the control center and was now linked into the colony systems. "I'm reading multiple incoming projectiles," Nyla's voice echoed in his thoughts. "Galacticorp is launching a full-scale assault." Gary's hands flew over the control panel, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to direct the fleet's point defense systems with unprecedented accuracy. Streaks of light crisscrossed the sky as their weapons intercepted the majority of the incoming missiles. "Nyla, what's the situation on the ground?" Gary asked, his focus split between the space battle and the colony below. "Luna and Dr. Zen are making progress," Nyla replied. "They've synthesized a neutralizing compound and are administering it to the affected colonists. Some are already recovering and joining our defense efforts." As the battle raged on, Gary noticed a flicker of movement on the tactical display. A Galacticorp stealth ship had slipped through their defensive lines and was descending towards the planet's atmosphere. "Nyla, we have a problem," Gary said, already maneuvering the flagship to intercept. "They're trying to deploy more of the weaponized hormone." Without hesitation, Gary broke formation, pushing the flagship to its limits. He weaved through the chaos of the battle, his enhanced piloting skills allowing him to execute maneuvers that would have been impossible for a normal human. As he closed in on the stealth ship, Gary could see its dispersal systems preparing to release the hormone. With split-second timing, he fired a precision blast, disabling the ship's systems without destroying the vessel. "Stealth ship neutralized," Gary reported. "Nyla, send a team to secure it. We need that evidence." Suddenly, a powerful signal washed over the battlefield. Gary felt his connection to Nyla flicker and strain. Around him, he saw Yadran crew members clutching their heads in pain. "Gary, something's wrong." Nyla's voice came through, weak and distorted. "Our empathic abilities. They're being disrupted." Gary scanned the area, his enhanced vision picking up a network of previously hidden orbital platforms. Galacticorp must have had these in place before the attack. "We need to shut them down." In that moment, Gary and Nyla made a decision that would change the course of the battle. They would leave their command posts and take the fight directly to the source of the disruption. "Meet me at Docking Bay 3, Gary said, already moving. "We're going to end this ourselves." Minutes later, they were aboard a small, high-speed shuttle, streaking through the chaotic space battle towards the central control platform. Gary piloted with incredible precision, while Nyla used her flickering empathic abilities to sense incoming threats. As they approached the platform, a squad of Galacticorp elite troops opened fire. Gary and Nyla moved in perfect synchronization, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge the incoming fire while returning their own. They fought their way through the platform's corridors, their movements a deadly dance of efficiency. Despite sustaining injuries, their heightened endurance pushed them forward. Finally, they reached the central control room. The door slid open, revealing a figure they had hoped never to see again. Victor Reeves, now more machine than man, his body a patchwork of advanced cybernetics. "Welcome," Reeves said, his voice a mechanical rasp. "I've been expecting you." Gary and Nyla exchanged a glance, their empathic link surging with shared persistence. As Reeves launched his attack, they knew the real battle was only just beginning. Gary and Nyla faced Victor Reeves, their bodies tense and ready for action. Reeves' cybernetic enhancements whirred and clicked as he moved, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You've come so far, only to fail at the final hurdle," Reeves said, his voice a mix of organic and synthetic tones. Gary and Nyla didn't waste time with words. They launched into action, their movements perfectly synchronized. Gary ducked low, aiming for Reeves' legs, while Nyla leaped high, her tail whipping towards his head. Reeves' augmented reflexes allowed him to counter their initial assault, but he couldn't match their seamless teamwork. As the fight progressed, Gary and Nyla's empathic link gave them an edge, anticipating each other's moves and covering any openings. The control room became a blur of motion as the three combatants exchanged blows. Sparks flew as Reeves' cybernetic limbs collided with the surrounding equipment. Gary and Nyla sustained injuries, but their enhanced endurance kept them in the fight. Finally, a well-timed combination of attacks brought Reeves to his knees. Gary pinned him down while Nyla accessed the control panel, deactivating the empathic disruptors. "It's over, Reeves," Gary said, securing the cyborg's hands behind his back. With the disruption field down, Gary and Nyla's full abilities returned. They quickly coordinated with their forces, turning the tide of the battle both in space and on the planet's surface. Hours later, as the dust settled, Gary and Nyla stood on the bridge of their flagship, overlooking Viros 3. The Galactic Corp fleet had been routed, and their ground forces were in full retreat. "We did it," Nyla said, her scales shimmering with a mix of relief and exhaustion. Gary nodded, feeling the weight of their victory. "But this is just the beginning. We need to take this evidence back to Yadra and expose Galactic Corp's actions to the galaxy." The journey back to Yadra was tense but uneventful. As soon as they entered the system, they received an urgent summons from the Yadran High Council. The council chambers were packed when Gary and Nyla arrived. King Zorn sat at the head of the assembly, his expression grave. The room fell silent as Gary and Nyla took their places at the center of the chamber. "We have reviewed your preliminary reports," King Zorn began, his voice echoing in the vast hall. "The evidence you've gathered is disturbing, to say the least. Please, present your findings to the council." Gary stepped forward, activating a holographic display. Images of the Viros 3 colony, the weaponized hormone, and the captured Galactic Corps personnel filled the air. "Members of the council," Gary said, his voice steady, "what we uncovered on Viros 3 goes beyond a simple corporate transgression. Galactic Corp has been systematically weaponizing empathic abilities, with the intent of controlling both human and Yadran populations." Nyla continued, her tail swishing as she spoke. "We've gathered extensive data on their operations, including the names of key personnel involved in these illegal activities. The scope of their corruption extends far beyond what we initially suspected." As they presented their evidence, murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the council. King Zorn's expression darkened with each new revelation. When they finished, King Zorn rose from his seat. "In light of this evidence, I propose the formation of an interstellar tribunal to try Galactic Corp's leadership and address the corruption we've uncovered. We must act swiftly and decisively to prevent further harm." The council voted unanimously to approve the measure. As the session concluded, King Zorn approached Gary and Nyla. "Your work here is not done," he said, his voice low. "We received intelligence about a secret Galactic Corp research facility on Nebula Prime. We believe it houses advanced prototypes of their empathic weapons, possibly even the means to reverse the effects of the enhanced hormone." Gary and Nyla exchanged glances, their empathic link buzzing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "We need you to lead a mission to infiltrate this facility," King Zorn continued. "The information you retrieve could be crucial for the upcoming tribunal and for the safety of both our peoples." "We're ready, Your Majesty," Gary said, standing tall. Nyla nodded in agreement. "When do we leave?" "Immediately," King Zorn replied. "A specialized team is being assembled as we speak. This includes your colleague Luna for her scientific expertise, and we've managed to secure the cooperation of Marcus Graves, a former Galactic Corp security expert." Within hours, Gary and Nyla found themselves aboard a sleek, experimental stealth ship designed for extreme conditions. As they prepared for departure, Luna joined them on the bridge, her eyes bright with willpower. "The ship's cloaking technology should get us past most of Galactic Corp's defenses," Luna explained. "But Nebula Prime's atmosphere might pose some challenges." Marcus Graves, a grizzled man with sharp eyes, added, "Once we're inside, I can guide us through their security systems. But make no mistake, this won't be easy." As the ship lifted off, Gary took the pilot's seat, his enhanced reflexes at the ready. Nyla stood beside him, her empathic senses extended to their limit. "Setting course for Nebula Prime," Gary announced, his hands dancing over the controls. The stars blurred around them as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Gary and Nyla shared a moment of silent communication through their link. Whatever challenges lay ahead on Nebula Prime, they would face them together. As the gas giant loomed before them, its swirling storms a maelstrom of color and violence, Gary steeled himself for the dangerous descent. The true test of their abilities, and the key to stopping Galactic Corp once and for all, awaited them in the heart of that turbulent world. As they approached the facility, Gary's enhanced vision caught sight of the massive defense grid surrounding the planet. "Initiating stealth protocols," Gary announced, his fingers dancing across the control panel. The ship's experimental cloaking technology engaged, bending light and energy around them. They slipped past the outer defenses undetected, descending through the turbulent atmosphere of Nebula Prime. The ship shuddered as they navigated through layers of swirling gases and electromagnetic storms. "We're approaching the coordinates," Luna said, her eyes fixed on the sensor readouts. "The facility should be there." Through the haze, a massive structure materialized. Its dark, angular form loomed before them, jam-packed with antenna arrays and defensive turrets. Marcus leaned forward, his expression grim. "Those are top-of-the-line security systems. We'll need to find a blind spot to dock." Gary nodded, guiding the ship in a wide arc around the facility. Nyla's empathic senses stretched to their limit, searching for any sign of detection. "There," Nyla said suddenly, pointing to a small maintenance airlock. "I sense minimal activity in that section." With practiced precision, Gary maneuvered the ship into position. The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud, and the team quickly donned their environmental suits. "Remember," Marcus warned as they prepared to enter the facility, "we're here for the prototypes and any data we can salvage. In and out as quickly as possible." They moved swiftly through the airlock, Gary and Nyla taking point. Their enhanced reflexes allowed them to disable security cameras and bypass locked doors with ease. As they delved deeper into the facility, the team encountered increasingly sophisticated defenses. Laser grids, motion sensors, and even automated drones patrolled the corridors. "This way," Marcus whispered, guiding them toward a heavily fortified section. "The main research lab should be through here." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from nearby corridors. "They've detected us," Luna said, her voice tight with tension. Gary and Nyla shared a quick glance, their empathic link buzzing with shared purpose. "We'll hold them off," Gary said. You two get to the lab and secure the data." As Luna and Marcus rushed ahead, Gary and Nyla took up defensive positions. The first wave of Galactic Corp security forces rounded the corner, weapons raised. What followed was a blur of motion and precision. Gary and Nyla moved in perfect synchronization, their enhanced abilities allowing them to anticipate and counter every attack. Stunner blasts flew past them as they disabled the security forces with non-lethal takedowns. Meanwhile, Luna and Marcus reached the main lab. Luna's fingers flew over the computer terminals, downloading critical research data, while Marcus secured the prototype weapons. "We've got it." Luna's voice crackled over the comm link. "Heading back to you now." Gary and Nyla fought their way back through the facility, clearing a path for their teammates. They regrouped at the airlock, their suits scuffed and scorched from the intense firefight. As they boarded their ship, a massive explosion rocked the facility. Klaxons wailed as emergency protocols engaged. "What was that?" Nyla asked, her tail twitching with agitation. Marcus's expression was grim. "A failsafe. They're going to scuttle the entire facility to keep it out of our hands." Gary didn't hesitate. He jumped into the pilot's seat and disengaged the docking clamps. The ship lurched away from the doomed structure just as secondary explosions began to tear it apart. But their troubles were not nearly finished. As they climbed through the atmosphere, a massive shape appeared on their sensors. "Galactic Corp battle cruiser," Luna announced, her voice tight with fear. "They must have been alerted to our presence." The cruiser's weapon systems came online, filling space with a deadly array of energy beams and missiles. Gary's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limit as he weaved through the barrage, but their ship took several hits. "Shields at 30%, Nyla reported. "We can't take much more of this." Gary's mind raced, analyzing their options. Then, a daring plan formed. "Nyla, prep the prototype weapons. We're going to give Galactic Corp a taste of their own medicine." He turned the ship, diving straight towards a massive cruiser. The enemy vessel's guns fell silent for a moment, its crew likely shocked by the seemingly suicidal maneuver. "Now!" Gary shouted. Nyla activated the prototype empathic weapons. A wave of invisible energy washed over the cruiser. On the enemy ship's bridge, chaos erupted as the crew suddenly found their thoughts clouded and their coordination disrupted. Taking advantage of the confusion, Gary piloted their ship past the cruiser's now uncoordinated defenses. As soon as they cleared the massive vessel, he punched in a blind hyperspace jump. The stars stretched into lines of light, and they plunged into the swirling tunnel of hyperspace. But their reprieve was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began to fail. "The jump strained our damage systems," Luna reported, her hands flying over the engineering console. "We're losing power fast." With a violent lurch, the ship dropped out of hyperspace. They found themselves drifting in an unknown star system, their engines dead and life support failing. Gary and Nyla sprang into action, their enhanced abilities allowing them to work at an incredible pace. They rerouted power, patched critical systems, and managed to restore minimal life support and communications. As the immediate crisis passed, the team gathered on the bridge, their faces illuminated by the dim emergency lighting. "Where are we?" Marcus asked, peering out at the unfamiliar stars. Luna checked the navigational systems. "I can't be sure. That blind jump took us well off any known charts." As they debated their next move, Nyla suddenly stiffened, her empathic senses flaring. "I'm detecting something. Massive. It's artificial, but unlike anything I've ever sensed before." Gary followed her gaze, his enhanced vision piercing the darkness of space. There, orbiting a distant gas giant, was a structure of impossible scale and alien design. "Is that a space station?" Luna asked, her voice filled with awe. Gary's hands tightened on the controls. With their ship crippled and their oxygen slowly depleting, they had little choice. Whatever it is, it might be our only chance. Let's hope it's friendly. Using the last of their maneuvering fuel, Gary guided the damaged ship towards a mysterious structure, unknowingly steering them toward a discovery that would change the course of history. Galactic history forever. As they approached the massive structure, Gary and Nyla shared a moment of silent communication through their empathic link, steeling themselves for whatever lay ahead. The alien station grew larger in their view screen, its intricate design becoming clearer as they drew near. Suddenly, a soft blue light enveloped their ship, and they felt a gentle tug. "We're caught in some kind of tractor beam," Luna announced, her fingers dancing across the console. Gary's enhanced reflexes proved useless, as the ship was smoothly guided into a vast docking bay. As the ship settled onto the deck, they saw a group of figures approaching, tall, slender beings with iridescent skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. "I'm not sensing any hostility," Nyla said, her tail twitching slightly. "But their minds are. Different. Complex." As the team prepared to disembark, the alien being stopped a short distance from the ship. One stepped forward, raised a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of peace, and spoke. To everyone's surprise, the words were in perfect galactic standard. "Welcome, travelers. We are the Etheria. We have been expecting you." The team exchanged shocked glances. How could these beings have been expecting them? Over the next few days, the Etheria explained that they were an ancient race, guardians of knowledge from long-extinct civilizations. They had detected the activation of the Yadaran technology and drawn Gary and Nyla's ship to their station. The Etheria shared their vast database with the team, revealing that the empathic technology they had discovered was but a small part of a much larger tapestry of advanced sciences. This knowledge, they explained, could revolutionize galactic society or destroy it if misused. As Gary and Nyla absorbed this information, they realized the true magnitude of their discovery and the responsibility that came with it. They knew they had to return to Yadra immediately. The Etheria provided them with the means to repair their ship and a small device containing a fraction of their knowledge database, a gift, they said, to help guide the younger races. As they prepared for departure, the Etheria left them with a warning. "The power you now possess will attract those who seek to control it. Choose your path wisely." With renewed purpose, Gary set a course for Yadra. The journey back was tense, filled with discussions about how to handle the situation upon their return. As they approached Yadra, they were met by a fleet of ships, both Yadaran and human. A familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Gary, Nyla, this is King Zorn. We've been searching for you. I'm afraid we have a situation here." Gary and Nyla exchanged worried glances. They could sense the tension even from orbit. Upon landing, they were immediately escorted to the Yadaran High Council chambers. The room was filled with both Yadaran and human officials, their faces grave. King Zorn addressed them directly. "We receive reports of your discovery. The implications are concerning. The Council has decided that this technology must be contained immediately." Gary stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Your Majesty, members of the Council, there's more to this than you know. We've learned things that could change everything." As Gary and Nyla recounted their experience with Etheria and the true scope of the ancient technology, the council chamber erupted into heated debate. Some argued for immediate containment, while others saw the potential benefits. King Zorn raised his hand for silence. "This is indeed a complex situation. We cannot ignore the potential dangers, but neither can we dismiss the possible advancements this knowledge could bring." After hours of deliberation, a compromise was reached. King Zorn proposed the creation of a secure research facility on Yadra's uninhabited moon. Gary and Nyla would be appointed as co-directors, overseeing the study of the ancient technology under strict supervision. As the plans for the Empathic Research and Development Center were set in motion, Gary and Nyla found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Construction crews worked around the clock to build the facility, while they collaborated with Luna and a team of human and Yadran scientists to analyze the data from the Etheria. Weeks turned into months as they made rapid progress in understanding the advanced empathic technology. They developed prototypes for defensive systems against Galactic Corp's weapons, but their research also unveiled possibilities they had never imagined. One evening, as Gary and Nyla stood on the observation deck of the nearly completed YARDC, overlooking the stark lunar landscape, they felt a shift in their empathic connection. Without warning, they found themselves sharing not just emotions, but complete thoughts and memories with unprecedented clarity. As they marveled at this new level of connection, an urgent message came through from King Zorn. News of the ancient Yadran technology had spread, and diplomatic tensions were rising across the galaxy. Several alien species were expressing concern about the power this technology represented. Gary and Nyla realized that their discovery had set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As they prepared for the challenges ahead, they knew that their enhanced abilities and unbreakable bond would be put to the ultimate test. The next day, as they walked into the ERDC's main research lab, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed a group of heavily armed intruders breaching the outer defenses. At their head was a familiar face, Victor Reeves, now more machine than man. Gary and Nyla shared a determined look. Whatever Galactic Corp had planned, they would face it together. As they rushed to confront the threat, they had no idea that their actions in the coming hours would not only decide the fate of the ERDC, but would send shockwaves across the entire galaxy. As Gary and Nyla rushed to confront the intruders led by Victor Reeves, they were suddenly enveloped by a blinding flash of light. When their vision cleared, they found themselves standing in the center of a vast amphitheater, surrounded by representatives from dozens of alien species. King Zorn's voice boomed from a nearby podium. "Order! We must have order!" The din of confused voices gradually subsided as the gathered delegates turned their attention to the Yadran monarch. "Esteemed members of the galactic community," King Zorn continued, "what you have just witnessed was an unintended demonstration of the ancient Yadran technology's power. In the face of a direct threat to our research facility, the empathic field expanded beyond our control, instantly transporting all of us here." Murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd. Gary and Nyla exchanged worried glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Their actions had inadvertently revealed the full scope of the technology's capabilities to the entire galaxy. As the initial shock wore off, the emergency session of the Human-Yadran Alliance began in earnest. Heated debates erupted as representatives argued over the implications of the empathic field incident and how to proceed. Amidst the chaos, a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. "If I may," she said, her voice cutting through the clamor, "I am Ambassador Zara Valens, and I believe I can offer some perspective on this matter." All eyes turned to the newcomer as she addressed the assembly. "While the power we've witnessed today is indeed staggering, we must not let fear cloud our judgment. Instead, we should focus on how this technology can be used responsibly for the benefit of all." As Ambassador Valens spoke, an urgent message flashed across the holographic displays surrounding the amphitheater. Luna's face appeared, her expression grave. "We're detecting increased Galactic Corp activity across multiple star systems. Intelligence suggests they're mobilizing for a major offensive." The news sent a fresh wave of panic through the gathered delegates. Gary stepped forward, his mind racing. "We don't have time for extended debates," he said firmly. "We need to act now." Nyla joined him, her tail swishing with persistence. "We have a proposal," she announced. "A way to use the ancient technology to our advantage against Galactic Corp." Over the next hour, Gary and Nyla outlined their plan for a controlled empathic network among Alliance forces. They explained how it could enhance coordination and communication between human and Yadran units, potentially giving them a crucial edge in the coming conflict. The proposal met with mixed reactions. Some delegates saw it as a necessary step, while others voiced concerns about ethical implications and potential misuse. Ambassador Valens mediated the discussions, guiding the Assembly towards a compromise. "We will implement the empathic network on a trial basis," King Zorn declared after lengthy deliberations. "It will be limited to a select group of volunteer forces, with strict oversight and safeguards in place." With the decision made, Gary and Nyla wasted no time. They returned to the ERDC, working tirelessly alongside Luna and their team to bring the empathic network online. As the system activated, reports flooded in from the volunteer forces. "This is incredible," a human captain marveled over the comm. "I can sense my entire squad's movements without even looking." A Yadran officer added, "The level of coordination is unlike anything I've experienced before." However, not all participants adapted easily to the heightened empathic connection. Some reported disorientation and difficulty processing the influx of shared emotions and thoughts. "We need to develop specialized training protocols," Nyla said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she analyzed the data. "Help them learn to filter and control the empathic input." As Gary and Nyla focused on refining the empathic network, Ambassador Valens embarked on a whirlwind diplomatic tour. She organized demonstrations showcasing the peaceful applications of controlled empathic enhancement. From revolutionary medical treatments to unprecedented breakthroughs in conflict resolution and cultural exchange. Weeks passed in a blur of activity. The Alliance's preparations accelerated as reports of Galacticorp's mobilization grew more alarming. Then, on a quiet evening as Gary and Nyla were reviewing tactical simulations, alarms blared throughout the ERDC. Luna's hologram materialized before them, her expression grim. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Galacticorp fleet assembling near the outer reaches of Alliance space. The size and composition suggest they're preparing for a full-scale invasion. Gary's eyebrows furrowed. "How many targets?" "Multiple Alliance worlds simultaneously," Luna replied. "This is it, the attack we've been preparing for." Within hours, the Alliance Military Command convened an emergency session. Gary found himself appointed as the overall strategic commander for Alliance forces, while Nyla was tasked with leading a special operations unit equipped with the new empathic enhancement technology. As Gary coordinated the Alliance's defensive preparations from the Central Command Center on Yadra, Nyla threw herself into training her special ops team. They ran grueling simulations and field exercises, pushing the limits of their empathic abilities while learning to manage the psychological strain of prolonged connection. The pressure was immense, and Gary and Nyla found themselves struggling to balance their duties with their personal relationship. Moments of tension and misunderstanding crept in, exacerbated by the constant empathic link they shared. "I can feel your frustration," Nyla said one evening as they prepared for yet another strategy session. "But I need you to understand Dash." Gary cut her off, his voice tight. "I do understand. That's the problem. I understand everything you're feeling all the time. Sometimes I can't tell where my thoughts end and yours begin." Nyla's tail drooped. "I know. It's not easy, but we can't let this drive us apart. Not now, when everyone is counting on us." Before Gary could respond, an alert chimed on their comm devices. Luna's voice came through, urgent and clear. "The Galacticorp fleet is on the move. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected on approach to Alliance space." Gary and Nyla locked eyes, their personal concerns forgotten in the face of the looming threat. They rushed to their respective posts, Gary to the Central Command Center, and Nyla to her waiting Special Operations Unit. As Gary entered the bustling command center, holographic displays sprang to life around him, showing the positions of Alliance forces and the approaching Galactic Corp fleet. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for the challenge ahead. All units, this is Commander Grayson, he broadcast across the empathic network. The enemy is inbound. Prepare to execute defensive protocols on my mark. Across the sector, Alliance ships moved into position. On a frontier world poised to bear the brunt of Galactic Corp's assault, Nyla and her team made final preparations for deployment. The galaxy held its breath as the two forces hurtled towards their fateful confrontation. The ancient Yadran technology had changed everything, but would it be enough to turn the tide against Galactic Corp's overwhelming force? As the first wave of enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace, Gary and Nyla knew that the answer to that question would determine the fate of countless worlds. Worlds. As the first wave of Galactic Corp ships materialized from hyperspace, Gary's voice rang out across the empathic network. All units, execute defensive protocols now. The Alliance fleet sprang into action, ships moving with uncanny precision as Gary's multi-layer formation took shape. Across the sector, vessel captains and their crews felt an unprecedented level of coordination, their movements guided by the empathic link. On the frontier world of Nexus Prime, Nyla and her Special Operations Unit touched down under the cover of darkness. The planet's rich mineral deposits made it a prime target for Galactic Corp's invasion force. "Team, we've got confirmed Galactic Corp presence," Nyla whispered, her tail twitching with anticipation. "Activate empathic stealth protocols." As one, the team's minds synced, their collective consciousness becoming a hazy blur to outside perception. They moved through the shadows of Nexus Prime's sprawling mining complexes, gathering intelligence on the enemy's operations. In the central command center on Yadra, Gary's eyes darted between holographic displays, tracking the unfolding space battle. Alliance ships danced through the void, outmaneuvering Galactic Corp vessels with preternatural skill. "Commander," a young lieutenant called out, her voice strained. "We're getting reports of empathic overload from the front lines." Gary's brow furrowed as he processed the information. "Adjust the network's intensity. We need to find a balance." On Nexus Prime, Nyla's team infiltrated deeper into enemy territory. As they approached a heavily guarded facility, a strange sensation washed over them. "Something's wrong," Nyla hissed, her empathic senses tingling. "There's a disruption." Inside the facility, they discovered the source, a prototype neural disruptor, its pulsing energy designed to interfere with the Alliance's empathic network. "We need to take it out," Nyla ordered, her mind already formulating a plan of attack. As her team moved into position, a sudden, searing pain tore through Nyla's mind. Miles away, in the command center, Gary stumbled, clutching his head. "Nyla," he gasped, the empathic link between them abruptly severed. For a moment, both struggled with the disorientation and emotional anguish of their broken connection. But there was no time to dwell on it. The battle raged on, demanding their full attention. Nyla steeled herself, pushing through the pain. "Commence assault." Her team struck with surgical precision, neutralizing the Galactic Corp defenders before they could raise the alarm. As Nyla approached the neural disruptor, its insidious energy making her skin crawl, an urgent transmission cut through the chaos. "This is Ambassador Zarvalens," the elegant voice rang out. "I received critical intelligence from Galactic Corp defectors. We have a new threat to contend with." Gary listened intently as Valens relayed the information about Galactic Corp's secret weapon, a massive empathic amplifier hidden within a gas giant in neutral space. "Understood, Ambassador," Gary replied, his mind racing. He turned to his command staff. "We need to divert a significant portion of our fleet to investigate this threat. It's a risk, but one we have to take." As Gary issued the redeployment orders, Nyla's team successfully disabled the neural disruptor on Nexus Prime. With the immediate threat neutralized, she received new orders to rendezvous with the fleet heading to the gas giant. "We're wheels up in 5, Nyla announced to her team. As they prepared for departure, she closed her eyes, focusing her mind. Slowly, tentatively, she felt her empathic connection with Gary reestablish itself. The journey to the gas giant, codenamed Project Omega, was tense. Alliance ships dropped out of hyperspace to find a swirling colossus of turbulent storms and gravitational anomalies. "All ships, establish a perimeter," Gary commanded. "Nyla, your team is clear for insertion." Nyla's specialized craft plunged into the gas giant's atmosphere, buffeted by fierce winds and assaulted by automated defenses. The empathically enhanced reflexes of her pilot were pushed to their limits as they corkscrewed through the maelstrom. "Energy signature detected," her science officer reported. "Massive output, consistent with the amplifier specs." As they descended deeper, the resistance intensified. Galacticorp fighters swarmed around them, their pilots' minds shielded from the empathic network. "Evasive maneuvers," Nyla ordered, her tail lashing as the ship lurched and spun. Back in the main theater of war, Alliance forces began to turn the tide against Galacticorp's invasion fleet. Ships moved in perfect synchronization, coordinated by the empathic network. But the strain was beginning to show. "Commander," an aide reported to Gary, "we're seeing increased cases of empathic fatigue across the fleet." Gary nodded grimly. "Push through. We need to break their lines." In the depths of Project Omega, Nyla's team finally breached the outer defenses of the central facility. As they prepared to disembark, alarms blared throughout the structure. "The amplifier," Nyla's science officer shouted. "It's powering up." Waves of empathic energy pulsed outward, threatening to overwhelm friend and foe alike. Nyla felt the pressure building in her mind, but her extensive experience with the ancient Yadran technology allowed her to resist. As her team fought their way towards the amplifier's core, Nyla's mind raced. She knew they couldn't simply destroy the device. Its meltdown could devastate half the sector. But perhaps. "I have a plan," she announced, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're going to repurpose this thing." Gary, monitoring the situation from afar, made a critical decision. "All units, prepare for empathic network boost. We're pushing it to the limit." As Alliance forces surged forward, breaking through Galacticorp's defenses, Nyla and her team reached the heart of Project Omega. The empathic amplifier loomed before them, a titanic construct of alien technology and human ambition. Nyla approached the control interface, her hands steady as she began the delicate process of reprogramming the device. Around her, her team fought off waves of Galacticorp security forces, their enhanced abilities pushed to the breaking point. Time seemed to stretch as Nyla worked, the fate of the galactic realm hanging in the balance. The amplifier's energy output continued to build, threatening to spiral out of control at any moment. In the command center, Gary watched the tactical displays with growing tension. The empathic network was becoming unstable, and reports of system failures were increasing across the fleet. As Nyla input the final commands into the amplifier systems, she sent a surge of thought through her reestablished link with Gary. They both knew that everything now hinged on the success of her daring plan. The amplifier's core pulsed with blinding energy, and for a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The amplifier's core pulsed with blinding energy, and for a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its collective breath. Nyla's fingers danced across the control interface, her mind racing as she initiated the reprogramming sequence. Around her, her team engaged in a fierce firefight with Galacticorp security forces. The air crackled with energy weapons fire and the acrid smell of ozone. "Cover the eastern approach," Nyla shouted, her tail whipping back and forth as she ducked behind a control panel. "We can't let them near the amplifier." Her team responded with practiced precision, their empathically enhanced reflexes allowing them to anticipate and counter the enemy's movements. Blaster bolts sizzled through the air, leaving scorch marks on the facility's metallic walls. Meanwhile, in the command center, Gary gritted his teeth as he watched the tactical displays. The empathic network was becoming increasingly unstable, threatening to collapse under the strain of coordinating the entire Alliance fleet. "Commander," a junior officer called out, her voice tight with tension. "We're losing cohesion in Sectors 3 and 7. The network can't handle the load." Gary made a split-second decision. Initiate tactical retreat for units in those sectors. Concentrate our firepower on these key Galactic Corp strongholds. He highlighted several points on the holographic display. As the Alliance forces adjusted their formation, Gary felt a surge of tenacity through his empathic link with Nyla. He closed his eyes, focusing on the connection, lending her his strength across the vast distance of space. Back in the heart of Project Omega, Nyla's team had successfully repelled the initial wave of Galactic Corp forces. They now worked feverishly to complete the reprogramming of the empathic amplifier. Sweat beaded on Nyla's forehead as she input the final commands. "Activation sequence initiated," she announced, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Brace yourselves." The massive crystalline structure at the center of the chamber began to pulse with increasing intensity. Waves of empathic energy radiated outward, washing over Nyla and her team. They staggered under the onslaught, their enhanced minds struggling to process the raw power. In orbit around the gas giant, the Alliance fleet detected a new threat. A fresh wave of Galactic Corp reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons charged and ready for battle. Gary's lips pursed as he assessed the situation. "All reserves, move to intercept," he ordered, knowing full well the risk he was taking. "We need to buy Nyla more time." As the space battle intensified, Nyla activated the repurposed amplifier. A surge of empathic energy exploded outward, rippling across the battlefield. Alliance forces found their abilities suddenly enhanced, their movements becoming fluid and synchronized beyond anything they had experienced before. Conversely, the Galactic Corp troops were thrown into disarray. Their ships veered wildly, colliding with one another as their pilots struggled against the empathic assault on their minds. For a moment, it seemed as though victory was within reach. But then, alarms began blaring throughout the Project Omega facility. The amplifier's energy output was spiraling out of control, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of space-time. "We need to stabilize it," Nyla shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "If it overloads, it'll collapse the gas giant's atmosphere and take us all with it." As her team scrambled to implement emergency protocols, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Perhaps I can be of assistance." Nyla whirled to see Dr. Elena Vasquez striding into the chamber, flanked by a small group of allies. The Galactic Corp defector's eyes were fixed on the pulsating amplifier, a look of tenacity on her face. "Dr. Vasquez?" Nyla's tail twitched in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I've been working undercover within Galactic Corp for years," Vasquez explained quickly, moving to join Nyla at the control interface. "I've studied this technology extensively. Together, we might have a chance of stabilizing it." As Vasquez and Nyla worked to contain the amplifier's surging energy, Gary made a bold decision. He ordered a portion of the Alliance fleet to create a corridor through the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere, preparing for a potential evacuation. "Commander," his second-in-command protested, "if we divert those ships, we'll be exposed to enemy fire." Gary's eyes never left the tactical display. "It's a risk we have to take. Prepare the tractor beam-equipped vessels. We're going to attempt to extract the entire facility." Inside Project Omega, the situation was growing increasingly dire. The facility groaned and shuddered as the overloading amplifier threatened to tear it apart. Nyla and Vasquez worked frantically, their minds racing to find a solution. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Nyla made a decision that would change everything. "I'm going to interface directly with the amplifier," she announced, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Before anyone could stop her, Nyla placed her hands on the pulsating crystal core. Energy surged through her body, every nerve ending screaming in agony. But slowly, gradually, the amplifier's output began to stabilize. Gary, light years away, felt Nyla's pain through their empathic bond. He staggered, gripping the edge of the command console for support. Pushing his own abilities to the limit, he focused all his energy on supporting Nyla, creating a feedback loop of strength between them. As Nyla held the amplifier in check, the Alliance ships locked on with their tractor beams. The entire facility shuddered as it was slowly, painstakingly extracted from the gas giant's core. "We're clear," Vasquez shouted as they broke free of the planet's atmosphere. Powering down now, the amplifier's glow faded, and Nyla collapsed to the floor, her body racked with pain from the immense energies she had channeled. As medical teams rushed to her aid, Gary received the news he had been waiting for. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, a note of awe in her voice, "the Galactic Corp fleet is in full retreat. We've done it. Sir, we've won." Gary allowed himself a moment of relief before issuing his next order. "Press the advantage. I want a full offensive across all fronts." He paused, his thoughts turning to Nyla. "And get me a shuttle. I need to get to the medical facility immediately." As the Alliance forces moved to secure their hard-fought victory, Gary raced across the stars to be by Nyla's side. The war might be ending, but the true consequences of their actions, and the future they had fought so hard to secure, remained uncertain. To be explored, Gary's heart raced as he boarded the shuttle, his mind focused solely on reaching Nyla. The journey to the medical facility felt interminable. As soon as the shuttle docked, Gary sprinted through the corridors, his empathic senses stretched to their limit, seeking any trace of Nyla's presence. He burst into the medical bay, his eyes immediately locking onto Nyla's still form. She lay motionless on a bio bed, surrounded by a team of human and Yadran medical specialists. Her body emitted a faint, pulsating glow, residual energy from her connection to the amplifier. "How is she?" Gary demanded, his voice hoarse with worry. A Yadran doctor turned to him, her large eyes filled with concern. "Commander, we've stabilized her vital signs, but she remains unresponsive. The empathic overload she experienced. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Gary moved to Nyla's side, gently taking her hand in his. He could feel the faintest flicker of her consciousness through their bond, like a distant star barely visible in the night sky. "I'm not leaving her," he stated firmly, pulling up a chair beside the bed. Over the next few days, Gary maintained a constant vigil at Nyla's side. He used their empathic link to provide a steady stream of comfort and strength, hoping to guide her back to consciousness. The medical staff worked tirelessly, monitoring her condition and administering treatments designed to help her process the immense empathic energy she had absorbed. As Gary sat by Nyla's bedside, his mind wandered through the memories of their journey together. He recalled their first meeting on Yadra, the initial tension and misunderstandings giving way to mutual respect and eventually a deep bond. He remembered the challenges they had faced, the battles fought side by side, and the moments of quiet understanding that had brought them closer. A week passed, marked by a flurry of activity beyond the walls of the medical facility. Reports filtered in of Alliance forces dismantling Galactic Corp's remaining strongholds. Dr. Elena Vasquez had become a key figure in the operation, her insider knowledge proving invaluable in bringing Galactic Corp's leadership to justice. On the 8th day, as Gary maintained his empathic connection with Nyla, he felt a sudden surge through their bond. Nyla's eyes fluttered open, immediately locking onto Gary's gaze. The room filled with a wave of relief and joy so intense that even the non-empathic medical staff felt its effects. "Gary," Nyla whispered, her voice weak but filled with warmth. He leaned in, squeezing her hand gently. "I'm here, Nyla. You're safe now." The medical team rushed to Nyla's side, conducting a series of scans and tests. Their expressions shifted from concern to amazement as they analyzed the results. "This is extraordinary," the lead human doctor exclaimed. "Nyla, your empathic abilities have been fundamentally altered. They've expanded beyond anything we've ever recorded in humans or Yadrans." As Nyla regained her strength over the following days, she and Gary worked closely with Alliance scientists to understand the changes in her empathic capabilities. They discovered that she could now initiate limited empathic connections across vast distances without technological assistance. During one of their testing sessions, Nyla closed her eyes, focusing intently. Suddenly, a holographic display lit up, showing activity on a space station orbiting a distant planet. "I can sense them," Nyla said, her voice filled with wonder. "The crew of that station, I can feel their emotions, their thoughts." Gary watched in awe as Nyla demonstrated her enhanced abilities. The implications were staggering. Instantaneous communication across the galaxy, new avenues for diplomacy and conflict resolution. As news of their victory spread and the galaxy began the process of rebuilding, Gary and Nyla found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Their roles in the war had made them heroes, symbols of what could be achieved when humans and Yadrans worked together. King Zorn himself arrived at the medical facility as soon as Nyla was strong enough for visitors. The Yadaran monarch's eyes gleamed with pride as he looked upon the pair. "You have done more for our people, all people, than I could have ever imagined," Zorn said. "And now, I have a proposal that may shape the future of our worlds." Gary and Nyla listened intently as King Zorn outlined his unprecedented offer for Gary to become co-regent of Yadra alongside Nyla. The proposal was met with a moment of stunned silence, followed by a surge of excitement through their empathic bond. "This is an opportunity to build something truly remarkable," Nyla said, her tail swishing with enthusiasm. Gary nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "A chance to create the future we fought so hard to protect." As Nyla continued her recovery, preparations began for a ceremony that would unite Gary and Nyla not just as life partners, but as co-regents of Yadra. The event would be a symbol of a new era, a fusion of human and Yadaran cultures. The day of the ceremony arrived, and the grand hall of the Yadaran royal palace was filled with dignitaries from across the galaxy. Gary stood at the front, his heart pounding with anticipation. As the doors opened and Nyla entered, resplendent in a gown that blended Yadaran and human design elements, their empathic bond surged with love and joy. King Zorn presided over the ceremony, his voice ringing out as he spoke of unity, progress, and the bright future that lay ahead. As Gary and Nyla exchanged vows and were officially named co-regents of Yadra, a cheer erupted that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. With the ceremony complete, Gary and Nyla stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the capital city. Below them, humans and Yadarans mingled freely, their voices rising in celebration. As they gazed out at the scene, hand in hand, they knew that their work was just beginning. "Ready to change the galaxy?" Nyla asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Gary squeezed her hand, feeling the strength of their bond. "With you? Always." As the sun set on this new chapter in their lives, Gary and Nyla turned their attention to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The war was over, but their greatest adventure was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.